1. I do not plan to die. Chapter 1. I do not plan to die. You're no king, Khal Drogo declared in the guttural common tongue Daenerys had taught him, his voice echoing through the hall. Your place is on the ground. Hundreds of Dothraki voices erupted in wild laughter, a deafening roar that swallowed the hall whole. Ser Jorah stood beside Viserys, shouting fiercely into his ear, but the clamor was so immense that Dany couldn't make out a single word. Viserys yelled back, pushing against Jorah until the knight shoved him, knocking him to the ground in one swift motion. Viserys drew his sword, the bare steel gleamed a vicious red, catching the firelight from the pits. Keep away from me, he spat, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Ser Jorah took a measured step back, and Viserys, wobbling, managed to stagger to his feet, brandishing the sword over his head like a battle standard. The borrowed blade from Magister Illyrio looked almost absurd in his hands, a mockery of the king he fancied himself to be. The Dothraki shrieked and cursed at him from all sides, their voices laced with venom and disdain. Dany felt a strangled cry tear its way from her throat, her heart racing. She knew, even if Viserys didn't, that drawing a sword here was a death sentence. Her cry caught his attention. His head whipped around, and he finally saw her. There she is, he sneered, his gaze narrowing as he staggered toward her, slicing at the air as though parting a sea of enemies. No one moved to stop him. The blade, you must not, she begged him. Please, Viserys, it is forbidden, put down the sword and come share my cushions. There's drink, food, is it the dragon's eggs you want? You can have them, only throw away the sword. Do as she tells you, fool, Ser Jorah shouted, before you get us all killed. Viserys only laughed, a broken sound that teetered between madness and despair. They can't kill us, they can't shed blood here in the sacred city, but I can. What he meant by that was soon clear as he laid the point of his sword between Daenerys's breasts and slid it downward over the curve of her belly. I want what I came for, he told her as her breathing stopped. Viserys, take the blade away. I want the crown he promised me. He bought you, but he never paid for you. Tell him I want what I bargained for, or I'm taking you back. You and the eggs both. He can keep his bloody full. I'll cut the bastard out and leave it for him. The sword pricked through the thin silk at her navel. She could see the tears in his eyes, hear the sob that caught in his throat, mingling with a hollow, hysterical laugh. This man, her brother, or what was left of him. Somewhere behind her, Jiki was sobbing, pleading in Dothraki, her words a desperate murmur. Dany wrapped an arm around her, drawing the girl close. Don't be afraid, she murmured. I shall tell him. She gathered what words she could, her tongue stumbling over the unfamiliar syllables. But when Khal Drogo's eyes met hers, she knew he understood. He stood from the high bench, a towering shadow outlined by firelight. Viserys recoiled, his face paling as the silence deepened. The only sound in the hall was the soft chiming of the bells in Drogo's braid with each step he took. His blood riders flanked him, copper shadows of death. Dany felt an icy calm settle over her as she met her brother's gaze. He says you'll have a crown, she told him, her voice steady. A splendid golden crown that men shall tremble to behold. Viserys grinned, but it stopped midway. In that moment, something shifted in Viserys' eyes. It seemed like magic to Dany's eyes, how sharply the change occurred. The drunken haze lifted from his eyes, and for an instant, he seemed lucid, awake with wide eyes, as if for the first time in his life. What's going on with him? Daenerys asked herself, her breathing hitched as the sword did not pull back from her belly. My memories returned in the blink of an eye. What the fuck is going on? I screamed in my head, my hand trembling on the hilt of my sword. This situation, this is from Game of Thrones, isn't it? Who am I? My memories were clear in my head. Memories carrying the identity of two people. It had been more than 2 decades since I'd been born here, but for the first time ever, I felt awake. After hearing that single line, a splendid golden crown that men shall tremble to behold, my existence seemed to have awakened. My true memories, not those of Viserys Targaryen, a fucking TV character, but the ones I carried from Earth, stirred in my head. Was this a fever dream? It definitely didn't feel like one. Everything was too real, my 5 senses, my mind, and the 2 sets of memories. It wasn't a lucid dream that I had become Viserys Targaryen. At least, it didn't feel like one. Aren't you going to pull the sword away, Viserys? Meaning I was going to die. In a few minutes from now on, This bitch in front of me was going to see me die and do nothing about it. Shit, why am I calling her a bitch? She has all the right to kill Viserys after all he did. It seems living as Viserys for 22 years has created quite some problems in my character. Regardless, the matter of fact was that I was going to die. And I didn't really want to. I just regained my sense of self after dying on Earth. No way I was going to die again. I had to figure something out. My ears heard the dramatic rush of my adrenaline as I decided on a dumb and risky. But compared to the only other option, crown, Khal Drogo had roared in the TV show. Here, a crown for a king. And upended the pot over the head of the man that I had now become. I didn't want to die, and this was the only possible way away from the Dothraki. Quote. Dany, my dear, I looked into the eyes of my sister, the future queen of dragons, as I pushed my sword a bit. She was still a little girl, and I had to use her to escape. Escort me out of here, will you? What? Daenerys sounded stupefied as I grabbed her neck from behind and pushed her forward. The Dothraki shouted, but Khal Drogo raised a hand to stop them. He didn't want to risk the sword that I still pressed against his yet-to-be-born son. This can be done. I had to be careful, but it was possible. I pushed her out, watching her struggle as she demanded in a sobbing voice why I was acting like this, but I didn't stop. I pushed her out of the tent we were in, finding ourselves under the open night sky. Do not approach, I shouted, looking around, my sword pointing at her belly. The Dothraki outside gasped as Khal Drogo and his goons walked out from the tent. I stopped myself from swallowing. I was surrounded by thousands of Dothraki here, and fire lamps burned all around me as if threatening to melt my head. If I failed here, I'd totally be burnt like in the original timeline. Bring me a horse, I demanded, bring me a horse, now. Calm down, Prince, I'll bring you a horse, Ser Jorah said, turning on his heel and walking away. I counted my breaths, surrounded by Dothrakis who seemed to circle around me. Khal Drogo growled, stay away from us, I said, and a trickle of blood dripped from Daenerys' belly. I see what you're trying to do, and I hate it. Move. Khal Drogo raised a hand, and the crowd dispersed, growing distant from us. As the crowd lessened, my eyes caught something that was hidden behind them all this time. There was a stone altar, and 3 large and scaly eggs rested above it, resting under the fire lamp right above. The dragon eggs, I walked over with Daenerys by my side as I approached the eggs. As I closed the distance, a hologram-like text floated above it. I blinked. What's that? Collect, collect, collect. That looks oddly familiar, I had a feeling what that was. I reached out the hand that was holding Daenerys' neck, and touched one of the eggs. Immediately, an arrow came flying. It passed right through where my hand was a few seconds ago, for the egg had blinked into thin air, and my hand had fallen down. If not for that, my hand would have been ripped apart, and the Dothraki would have jumped me immediately. Who the hell fired that? I quickly grabbed Daenerys' neck again, my sword poking her in the chest. Blood trickled down, painting the fabrics over her belly red. Drogo, kill that fucker who fired that arrow. Otherwise, I'll kill your baby. Drogo growled, and his head snapped to the side. Hidden behind a crowd, there was a Dothraki man who held an arrow. He panicked as Drogo's eyes locked onto him. Drogo looked to the men beside him and nodded. They moved, weapon at hand, as the blades cut the throat of the archer swiftly. That should hold back others from firing for a bit, even if little, I breathed in. I wanted the other 2 dragon eggs too. But, I didn't want to risk it again and cost my life. I didn't even know where the egg was right now. Some kind of inventory. I have the horse, Ser Jorah returned, the sound of hooves hitting the ground as a strong, muscular white horse walked behind him. I breathed in. Help me lead the horse out of the village, Ser Jorah. Through the western gate, I said and snapped my head toward Khal Drogo. Order all your Dothraki to move to the east, and they better stay there until I'm gone. Otherwise, you guys will lose your next call. I poked my crying sister's belly again, watching the Dothraki growl in anger all around me. Khal Drogo clapped his hand, shouting something in his language. All the Dothraki moved, focusing on one side of the village. I scoffed, ha, I can sense those hiding, Drogo. Tell them to come out too. I looked deep into his eyes, and he clapped his hands again. Dozens of Dothraki moved from behind tents and headed to the east. They growled, shooting me glares of anger. Ser Jorah sighed and nodded. He led the horse toward the now empty part of the village, and I followed him with Daenerys in my grasp. I didn't turn my back to the Dothraki. That'd be suicide. I walked backward, barely following Ser Jorah, as we approached the western part of the village. This is foolish, Prince, Ser Jorah said once we were out of range. They were going to kill me, Esser, I muttered. I know they were. Why else do you think I became sober in a second? I saw it, in the fire. I intentionally made it sound mystical. That way, Ser Jorah would assume I had gained some magic. I am sorry, little Dany, I told the crying Targaryen princess who was sobbing with her jaws clenched. But your stupid husband wants me dead. Because of something you did yourself. Shish, now, if you talk back so loudly I'll have to knock your teeth out so that the spying Dothraki realize I haven't grown soft in a minute, I said, dragging her with me as we soon approached the western part. It was barren of any people, for all the Dothraki were a few minutes away from here. Still, riding a horse on my own from here would be suicide. Get up, sister, I took out the dagger that Ser Jorah carried on his thigh and pressed it on her belly. A sword would make it harder to climb the horse for me. She grumbled and mounted the horse, and I mounted after her, shouting back, don't shoot any arrow. Because if my body falls, I'll put my weight on my dagger as I die. No arrows came flying. Ser Jorah sighed from the ground, they'll kill you for this. That's if they ever find me, Esser, I smiled at him and then pulled the lead rope. The horse neighed, and it blasted forward at a terrible speed. The night breeze rustled my hair as I kept shouting to warn the Dothraki about their arrows and about their bad decision if they chose to pursue me. My dagger remained pressed on my sister's belly as the barren desert land passed by us. Although I called it desert, it wasn't a desert of sand, but grass. The great Dothraki grass sea. Hills passed, covered in tall grass, as did the few actual trees that marked the land. All the while, adrenaline didn't leave my body for a single second. Seconds turned into minutes, and minutes into hours. Until I slowed down beside an oasis, a little pond with some large trees above it, letting out a breath. I withdrew my dagger and mounted off the horse. I patted Dany on her thighs, motioning her to come down. She stared at me, her eyes dark. Don't give me that look, sister, I shrugged, pulling her down. I didn't want to die. You stay here. The oasis has plenty of water to survive the few hours it'd take the Dothraki to arrive. And please, don't tell them which direction I'll be going if only to repay me for not kidnapping you and separating you from your dearest husband. You're a bad man, she stared at me and said. You're a taint on all brothers in the world. I opened my mouth to say something, but before I could, something flashed before my eyes. It was the hologram of a text message floating smoothly over a fancy box. Like those of game windows. Achievement unlocked. You've survived your original death, steering into a plotline that never existed. The tutorial mission, Survive, has been fulfilled. You've unlocked full access to the Dragon system. Ah, I muttered, blinking at the sight as my lips widened a little. The windows vanished, and I looked at Daenerys. It seems you're wrong, my sister. I looked deeply into her eyes, I'm a dragon. The night embraced me once more as I rode the horse faster than before, leaving behind Daenerys and the cursed Dothraki. Riding toward somewhere far from them both, for one didn't have to be a genius to know that they all wanted me dead, and they'll live by that desire if they ever met me again. Image here. Master 4th Wall Note. New story, Heya. I hope you like the start. A lot more fast-paced than the start of my other stories. I'll post the next chapter soon in a few hours, so leave some comments for some algorithm boost. 70 comments 0 vote. 2 I've already been found. Chapter 2. I've already been found. 7 kingdoms, 1 continent. Westeros was an enjoyable place on the screen but a harsh place to live in. Especially for a modern man who'd just regained his memories. In hindsight, Essos was better. Sure there was slavery, but slavery's on your side if you had the money. I had a pouch of gold coins, and using that I could buy slaves and spend my days in luxury until the end. Unfortunately, my pride as a Targaryen remained raging despite regaining my memories. I had lived as the fool that was Viserys Targaryen for 22 years, and the blood in my veins demanded I return to Westeros and reclaim my throne. But pride was one thing, logic another. I didn't have the ambition of ruling the 7 kingdoms. I didn't have the ambition for anything right now, nor did I know what I wanted. Non-stop horse riding for the last 2 weeks had left me confused and hungry, and the only thing I knew was that I didn't want to die. and returning to Westeros and fighting for the throne was certain death. In that case, wasn't it better to just stay here? A land where the old gods have long since lost their influence, and the new ones reign supreme. That was Essos, a continent almost double the size of Westeros. Fuck, I cursed, swallowing my saliva. I couldn't hold back anymore. I yanked out the water skin strapped to my side and poured it down my throat. The half a mouthful of remaining water fell into my throat, and I gulped. I sucked on it till the last drop and coughed when nothing more fell. It's not as if villages didn't exist here where I could have refilled the water. But the problem was that stopping anywhere meant the chance of being recaptured by the Dothraki would grow higher. It was too dangerous to take the chance. I hoped Daenerys hadn't sold me out, but I didn't trust her not to. So I just rode my horse in a random direction. Thankfully, it wasn't the red waste that I ended up in, otherwise, I'd have died from dehydration by now. No, I think I was making my way toward the sea. Come on, get moving, I sighed and patted my horse. That thing had been carrying me for far too long. The short breaks during the night were mostly to let it rest, as much as it was to catch myself some sleep. I couldn't stay in Essos. There was no way I could. Game of Thrones was one of those worlds where a butterfly effect could cause immense change in the entire world. A man might survive if the wind blew the wrong way, and that man might charge an army to King's Landing a week later, writing the pages of history anew. It was that type of world. And now that something objectively major has changed, where the Targaryen trademark didn't remain under Daenerys' sole existence, the world might go through a whole different plotline just because of this. For example, Khal Drogo might not die. In that case, the Dothraki would certainly continue searching for me forever. And the day they find me, and they definitely will someday, for a man could only hide for so long, they'd tie me behind a horse and ride into the horizon. I wasn't ready to have my balls mutilated by cobblestone roads. If I remained in Essos, death was imminent. On the other hand, I could survive in Westeros as long as I didn't gun for the throne. I was 5 years old when I left Westeros, nobody would recognize me. I'd even cut my hair and grow a beard for additional certainty. Ding. N+1 for staying strong on an empty stomach. Ah, and there's this thing too. In the worst case scenario, I had this to rely on. I'd played my fair share of games back in my last life, and if this system thing wasn't my mind playing tricks on me, it meant I had a genuine shot at building myself into Superman. Viserys Targaryen, 22 years old, level 2, dash, 2 STR, 4 End, 2 Dex, 7 Int, 7 Luke, It was a game-like system window. The gamer system, although it lacked much of the original's features, which was probably the reason why it called itself the Dragon system, I could see myself rising high with its help. I had gained 1 level during this horse ride, and all of my stats increased by 1 through that. I definitely couldn't survive a second against 100,000 Dothraki though. Yep, I had to leave Essos. The decision was made. The original Viserys could never have taken this decision without an army, or else his balls would have jumped to his shoulders, but I was different. I knew the plot, and I had a system. I also had a new quest. Waking the Dragon. It was about the dragon egg I stole. There were much more details in the quest, some advice on how to hatch it, but I couldn't focus on that yet, so no point in wasting time thinking about it. I had yet to decide on a true goal, but for a start, I had to grab a ship to cross the seas. Wait, is that another mirage? I blinked at the sight in the distance. After leaving the Dothraki grass sea, I stumbled upon a land mostly barren with stones and hills. For the first time since then, I saw large signs of human civilization in the distance. There were high walls, and there was a sea. Was I seeing things again, or did I actually stumble upon a port city? I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then I fell. My horse wavered underneath me, falling on its knees, as I was sent tumbling forward, rolling on the soil. I coughed, rising up, arg. Shit, stupid little. I cursed the poor horse and sighed. I went silent and slowly approached it, hand reaching out to pat it. Nay, it looked worn out. Its majestic white fur was darkened from the week's journey. It had brought me here so far, so I couldn't bring myself to be harsh at it. I looked into its eyes and sighed. Fine, we'll rest for a bit. Don't die on me. It was risky, but I couldn't really walk from here even if I could see the city. The distance was too much, and it'd take hours. I should just rest for those hours instead. ***. The The rhythmic drum of hooves was the only sound breaking the stillness of the barren plains. The sun hung low, casting a dull orange hue across the horizon, while the distant outline of Volantis city slowly came into view. My eyes glinted in awe at the sight. I was approaching a real medieval city. The city rose like a sleeping beast, its ancient branches sprawling, its walls towering above the flat landscape. A slight breeze stirred the dry grass, carrying with it the scent of saltwater from the nearby river, mixing with the dust that clung to everything. I could make out the silhouette of the long bridge, arching high above the Rhône like a spine, connecting the two halves of the city. It seemed peaceful from a distance, but I knew better. In Volantis, peace was a lie. Volantis was a city inhabited by mostly slaves. Volantis, one of the oldest cities in Essos, a place where the chains of the past never stopped rattling. Stupid old people loyal to old traditions ruled this land. As for how I knew for sure that it was Volantis city, the mini-map floating in the corner of my vision showed the name. Volantis city. Even though I, as Viserys Targaryen, hadn't seen the place before, I remembered seeing it in the show. The system wasn't just handing me game stats, it was giving me other useful tools too, like this map. The faint glow of the name made me recognize it. The closer I got, the more fresh the empty air felt. I had finally left the Dothraki Sea, the wastelands. But while the smell was fresh, the sight wasn't light. Slaves, more than I could count, milled about even outside the city walls. They stood with their heads lowered and collars wrapped tight around their necks. Human property, a common sight in Essos, I don't feel disgusted. I thought I would, given my modern side. But I was surprisingly fine with it. In this world, I was a highborn. What did it matter if slaves died around me? The guards spotted me as I approached the gates, their eyes narrowing, hands resting lazily on the hilts of their weapons. They weren't tense, just bored, for they must have seen 100 travelers today already. Calm, I said to my horse and pulled the reins, and my Danny White snorted in response, its exhaustion mirroring mine. After riding for what felt like an eternity, we were both about ready to collapse. "You there?" one of the guards grunted, stepping forward. His armor was dented and worn, but his eyes were sharp. "State your business." I could smell alcohol from his breath even from here. How unprofessional. I swung my leg over and dismounted, my boots kicking up the dust that coated the ground. My hair, now short, barely brushed my collar. I had cut it earlier while resting with the horse, a small change, but one that might keep the wrong people from recognizing me. Not that anyone here would care too much about a stray Targaryen, last seen 17 years ago by the public. "Just passing through," I said, wiping the sweat from my brow. "How much for entry?" The second guard chuckled. "Gold coin," he said, extending his hand expectantly. His fingers wiggled in the air as if trying to pluck it straight from my pocket. "Of course, it's gold." I fished out a coin from the pouch at my side, tossing it to the guard. He looked it around and bit into it with a grin before waving me through. Rich man, welcome to Volantis." I ignored them and led my horse inside, walking beside it as we entered the city proper. The streets were busy, thrumming with the noise of traders, merchants and the dull hum of slaves moving about, doing their master's bidding. Collars of iron and bronze around their necks marked their status. Some had tattoos branded on their faces, symbols indicating their role in this twisted system. I forgot what the different tattoos mean. I wondered, barely noticing a slave approaching me until he spoke. "Sir, would you like me to take care of your horse?" he asked, his voice low, eyes glued to the ground. I nodded. Yes, see to it." I gave the permission. There was no need to worry about the horse being stolen. Slaves didn't have the luxury of making those kinds of mistakes. With my horse handed over, I wandered deeper into the city. The air smelled of sweat, sea salt, and roasting meat. Shouts from market stalls filled the streets, mixed with the clanging of metal from nearby smithies. Yet, what stood out the most was the sight of so many slaves, their branded faces and beaten-down expressions so common they were part of the scenery. As I walked, a man sidled up beside me, rubbing his hands together like he'd just been handed something precious. His eyes gleamed, wearing a vulgar grin. "Looking for something, friend? Maybe a few girls to keep you company? We got the best bed slaves in all of Volantis. Harpies with thighs so soft you'll forget where you are. Or, if you're more the working type, we got boys who'll carry your loads or build you whatever you need. We mark 'em good here." He laughed, slapping the ass of a thick girl standing beside him. She gasped, shooting me a fearful look. I glanced at him, and then at the girl. This is bad, I don't feel disgusted at all. As Viserys, I was 22 years too old to be disgusted by slave whores. I almost pondered the offer seriously for a minute. He kept talking, painting vivid, vile pictures of what he could offer. Seems you're not from here. You see the tattoos, each one means something. Fish for the docks, hammer for the ones who work steel, fly tattoo indicates dung shovers, and tears for whores. You name it, I can get it. He added, got fresh ones. Girls, young, untouched if you know what I mean. In the end, I shook my head. Not interested, I muttered. I didn't feel as disgusted by slavery, but that didn't mean I'd give in to Viserys' lust. The man tried to persuade me further, but I excused myself and left him there, continuing toward the heart of the city. Whores could go fuck themselves. I needed food, rest, anything that'd stop this trembling of my starving, sleep-deprived body. After a while, I found a small inn tucked into a corner of the marketplace. It wasn't grand, but it would do. I didn't need attention. I stepped inside, the dull hum of conversation filling the air as I found a table near the back. Before long, a boy, no older than 12, scurried over. His clothes were threadbare, and he looked half-starved himself, but his eyes were sharp. Can I get you something, Esser? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. I'm no Esser. Bread, meat, and water, I said, hunger gnawing at my stomach. Anything fresh will do. He nodded and disappeared into the back. When the food arrived, I tore into it like a man starved for months, which wasn't far from the truth. The bread was stale, the meat chewy, but I didn't care. The food was mediocre at best, but I ate it all the same. It was the first decent meal I'd had in days. I ate until my stomach hurt. When I finally leaned back, sated, I reached into my pouch for another coin. Fuck, I wanna give him all the gold. That was delicious. Mediocre food tasted divine on an empty stomach. I got up from the table and walked over to the counter. I should ask about a ship, too. I stopped before the scruffy man at the counter. How much? I asked. The man looked at me and shrugged to wave me off. Nay need, the customer over there already paid for your meal. What? My spine stiffened, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I turned slowly, eyes scanning the room until they landed on a figure in the corner, draped in red. A hood concealed their face, but there was no mistaking the fact that they were watching me. They raised a hand and waved in a slow, deliberate motion. I swallowed hard. Have I been found out already? I had cut my hair and hidden myself as best I could. Yet somehow, someone had noticed, and they were sitting across the room, calmly watching me. My fingers itched toward the dagger at my side, but I didn't make a move. We locked into a silent stare-off. The hooded figure stayed silent, and the air around us grew heavier. Who the hell was that? She lowered her robe slightly and smiled at me. Ah, yes, I blinked, lowering my dagger. A fucking red priestess, no wonder. They could recognize me even in hell. Image here. Author note. Well, that's the 2 chapters for the day. Leave some comments, guys, and also power stones to win against the algorithm, and get more chapters. More importantly, reviews. Need 10 reviews for the stars to appear, so I'll appreciate a lot if you leave any reviews right away. Next chapter comes out in 26 hours. 36 comments 0 vote. 3. The Warrior of Light. Chapter 3. The Warrior of Light. The mood in the restaurant thickened, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching the priestess sitting across the room. She returned my gaze with a calm, unwavering smile, the kind that had no business being on someone's face when they were about to be killed. I slipped my hand to my side, fingers brushing the hilt of my knife as I moved forward, my steps careful and slow. The tavern's dull murmur faded into a low hum. Shadows stretched under the dim candlelight, pouring around the edges of her table where she sat alone, draped in blood-red robes, her face mostly concealed by the hood. The crowd around us carried on with their drinks, oblivious or perhaps pretending not to notice. This was Volantis, after all. People knew when not to interfere. As I reached her table, her eyes glinted beneath the shadow of her hood, meeting mine with a confidence that felt too solid and calm. I didn't like that. I settled into the seat beside her, pressing the dagger against her belly. She didn't flinch, instead, she tilted her head, letting the hood slip back fully to reveal her face in all its bold allure. Her gaze drifted down to the blade as if it were a curious trinket rather than a threat, the barest hint of amusement in her eyes. Oh my, she murmured, her voice as soft as silk and carrying a warmth like that of a heavy blanket. She sounded seductive. I wasn't expecting such an aggressive greeting. I kept my eyes on hers, my grip firm on the dagger. Then what did you expect after stalking someone who's gone to all this trouble to hide? People can feel threatened. I hope you won't be surprised if I kill you right now, priestess. Her lips curled into a faint smile. Much more reason for you not to threaten me back. Or shall I scream your name for all to hear? I pressed the blade harder against her, enough that I saw her take a shallow breath. Much more reason I got you right here. Right now. The woman's laughter rang out, soft but clear, as she lifted a hand to her mouth, her lips curving into a faint, almost mocking smile. She didn't seem the least bit unnerved by the knife. Her other hand reached up, slipping the hood back from her face in one smooth movement, revealing her features in full. Dark, cascading curls framed her face, spilling over her shoulders with a seductive elegance that softened the sharpness in her gaze. Her skin was pale, almost luminous in the dim light, accentuating high cheekbones and dark, intense eyes that seemed to hold a glint of amusement. The deep red of her gown hugged her figure, rich fabric embroidered with intricate lace that drew the eye down along every curve. A pendant hung low at her neck, resting just above her chest, the dark gemstone glinting like a flame in the shadows. Image here, she was simply, damn. I'd be lying if I said she wasn't beautiful. No, not beautiful, stunning. She was far more beautiful than what I remembered from the TV show. It was as if the actress had gone through enhancing surgeries. Her eyes sparkled a deep, hypnotic shade that seemed to hold some odd flame. Her smile held a confidence I rarely saw, even in people used to wielding power. Her elegant gaze seemed certain that I wouldn't dig the knife into her. For a moment, I wondered how those eyes would feel looking up at me. Shit. Not the time to start thinking with my dick. Fucking visories. Thankfully, I managed to keep my expression strong. I love women, but I really had to control this libido of mine. Perhaps we should take this conversation outside, she asked, her gaze not wavering from mine. Her expression softened as she looked down at the dagger pressed to her stomach and I pressed it in just a little more until a single bead of blood welled up beneath the blade's edge. She hissed. I think you're taking me too lightly, I said. It might bring you death, priestess. I had to establish the relationship right here. If she was going to pretend to be respectful, I was going to push her to her edge and see if she could maintain that. Her smile faltered ever so slightly, and I saw something shift in her eyes. Prince, trust me, you'll want to hear what I have to say. I didn't come here to bring you trouble. Otherwise, you'd be dead by now. As if to prove her words, a dozen of the customers turned their gazes at me. It was brief, but I didn't miss it. I frowned. I was surrounded. Kinvara, the Red Priestess of Volantis. I remembered her from the TV show. The way she'd looked at Daenerys with that same intensity, talking about her great future, about her power and destiny. Did she already have those visions about that girl? Was she here to capture me and hand me over? However, it was as she had said. If she wanted to kill me or capture me, she had enough people around to be able to do that already. My eyes narrowed. The truth is, even if I do drive this dagger into her throat, I doubt that it'll do any lasting damage. She didn't just have the confidence of someone who thought herself untouchable, she had the authority of someone who might actually be so. A priestess of the one true God, as they said. I exhaled slowly, drawing back the dagger, though I didn't put it away entirely. I glanced around the room, catching faint glints from the shadows, still feeling unseen eyes on me. I guess I had no other choice. Whatever she wanted to do with me wasn't death. At least not an immediate one. And since that was the case, I was confident that I'd managed to find one way or another using that system to escape danger. Fine, I said with a nod. Lead the way, High Priestess Kinvara. Her eyes trembled slightly seeing me refer to her by her title and name. It was not as if it was a secret, but regardless, most people didn't know her name. It was the case with most high priestesses. People referred to them by their titles instead. So she stared at me for a brief moment before smiling. I shall do that. The priestess rose gracefully, her gaze lingering on me as she adjusted her robes, covering the small spot of blood left from the knife. Her wound healed, the blood vanishing. She smiled up at me when she saw me staring at the scene that'd have been considered a miracle in the modern world. She turned toward the door, casting one last glance over her shoulder before slipping into the crowd. I followed, keeping close, my hand never far from my dagger. ***. The streets of Volantis stretched and writhed around us like the veins of some ancient beast, pulsing with life and decay. Stalls lined the cramped alleyways, vendors shouting out the prices of spices, dried fish, and half-rotten fruit, while slaves shuffled past in chains, their eyes hollow. I didn't like this place. No, I hated it. It smelled like trash here. It was a thick smell, filled with sweat, salt, smoke, and something else, something bitter and metallic that made me want to gag. Around us, the noise was loud and relentless, but she glided through it, untouched, like the chaos existed only for everyone else. I kept my gaze on her, my grip tight on the hilt at my side. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" I muttered, just loud enough to reach her over the noise. Every nerve in my body was on edge, wary of eyes in the crowd, ears too close, and whispers that might carry my name. I really wanted to leave Essos as soon as possible. Also, I should do something about this hair. Blonde stood out. She shot me a sideways look, lips curled in that maddening smile. "Oh, be patient, Prince. Do you really want to discuss such sensitive matters here, in front of everyone?" I stopped cold, letting a few shifty-eyed passers-by bump into me with muttered curses. The Red Priestess stopped as well, turning to face me with that look that I had come to find annoying. Calm, condescending like I was an overeager child. "Prince, what's the matter?" I narrowed my eyes, clenching my jaws and showing her my irritation. "I'm not about to follow some suspicious bitch to a secret meeting place. So either say what you have to say or leave." Was I being too paranoid? Too annoying and immature? Maybe. Since I was already surrounded by her people hidden in the crowd, it might have been pointless to complain. But still, I didn't feel like giving her whatever she wanted without resisting. Her smile widened, a flash of teeth against red lips. "Hey, quite a foul mouth for royal blood," she said, the words dripping with amusement. "I don't wish you harm, Prince. In truth, despite my subtle threat at the inn, none of those men can hurt you, neither can I, even if I wanted to, not when you've already defied death once." Silence. The crowd continued to push around us, but her words hung in the air, making everything else feel muted and distant. "What are you talking about?" My voice was low, steady. Testing. Her gaze softened like she was peering into me, past me, into something I wasn't even aware of. "Ah, yes, it makes sense that you wouldn't know, would you? People are rarely aware of their coming death," she murmured like she was speaking to herself more than to me. "The day you escaped the Dothraki, that was the day you were supposed to die. That was your fate." She moved closer, slowly, her hand reaching out until her fingers rested against my chest. They lingered there, cold and deliberate, like she was marking something only she could see. I stayed still, barely breathing, as her hand slid down. Her fingers were soft, her touch felt both too intimate and too calculated. "Fate," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the crowd. "The will of God. And yet, despite the order of things, you survived. You did not defy death, rather, the one true God simply changed his mind about taking your life. For reasons only he knows." Her fingers pressed slightly against my chest. "So, when you came to Volantis, of all places, I took it as a sign that R'hllor has chosen me to guide you, to help you achieve whatever goals you hold close to your heart. Because," her voice softened, carrying a reverence that sent a chill down my spine, "I think you're him, the chosen." A moment of silence stretched between us. I forced my voice to remain steady. "Who?" Her lips curved, and she leaned in, her breath brushing against my ear. "The warrior of light," she whispered, her words laced with a worshipful kind of madness. "My hero." Her hand left my chest, and she pulled back, her gaze never wavering, locking onto mine with a look that could have been mistaken for love, if love was ever that intense, that consuming. "Or perhaps you'd prefer, my king, more suitable." She lingered for a second more, smiling, and then, without another word, turned away. Her steps were now slow and deliberate, the sway of her hips seductively calculated. I watched her fade into the crowd, her red robes blending with the chaos of the market until she was nothing more than a smudge of crimson. The warrior of light, the hero. Somehow, I managed to hold back my laughter. She thought I was some kind of chosen one, some mythical figure her god had anointed. What a fool, but a useful tool if I played this right. If this woman wanted to make herself a willing tool, who was I to correct her? I could use a practitioner of blood magic more than ever right now. After all, I had something very precious that I wanted to awaken. Magic. To rejuvenate the world itself. 4. A laughable plan, or is it? Chapter 4. A laughable plan, or is it? Author note. It's Sunday, and we need some boosting since the story is so new. Because of that, I'll set a Power Stone goal. I'll post Chapter 5 if we cross 100 Power Stones in the upcoming hour. I'll go through the promise even if we're very close to the goal but don't manage to cross it. So vote and push us high on the rankings. The mansion was a sprawling fortress of luxury, hidden deep within the black walls of Volantis. The black walls, ancient, dark stone fused by Valyrian fire, rose high above the city, separating the old blood from the masses below. Only the oldest, most powerful families, those whose blood traces back to the ancient and powerful Valyrian freehold, were permitted to live within its protective confines. Outside, Volantis sprawled in chaos and commerce, but inside these walls, order and supremacy reigned. I followed her up winding marble staircases through halls lined with tapestries depicting fire and light until we arrived at a grand structure that dwarfed the rest of the mansions around it. Of course, the Church of Light is rich, I thought as we climbed, staring up at her swaying hips, hidden by robes flowing around her like rivers of blood. We were at the Red Temple, the heart of R'hllor's influence in Volantis. Its crimson spires rose high above the black walls, casting a shadow over the district as if declaring that the Lord of Light's reach extended over all. It was no surprise that the temple was opulent. Here, after a bit of walking through a hallway, we stopped before a door. She pushed it open and nudged me with a chin. "I'll be right back." Very suspicious, I said, but it was too late. She smiled and turned on her heel while I walked inside. The room was luxurious, rich. Crimson tapestries adorned the walls, embroidered with swirling flames and intricate symbols of R'hllor. A grand chandelier hung from the ceiling, a golden frame glinting in the candlelight that filled the space with a warm, almost hypnotic glow. Plush cushions and velvet drapes covered low, ornate couches scattered around, and a table inlaid with red gemstones gleamed in the center of the room, holding bowls of exotic fruits and wine. Indeed, the Red God's faithful enjoyed power and wealth, and as the High Priestess, she stood at the center of it. No wonder she acted so confident, as if she was untouchable. I could use her. She had the potential to bring me much. I looked at the large, high window facing the city. I walked toward it and glanced outside, catching a glimpse of the city spilling out below the walls, all the way to the summer sea. The fresh salt air swept in, filling my lungs as I watched the ocean that I'd have to cross soon. It was strange and refreshing, to be this high up, looking out over the world as if it were mine for the taking. I wouldn't lie, I felt a little greedy. Soon, the door creaked open behind me, and I turned. She entered, a silver tray in her hands piled high with gleaming fruits. With her usual calm, she crossed the room and presented the tray to me as if it were some kind of peace offering. "Here." I looked down at the fruit, then up at her, meeting her gaze with a flat expression. She let out a soft laugh, setting the tray down on a nearby table and picking up a slice of apple. She bit into it, eyes still locked on mine, savoring each bite. "You really think I will poison you?" she said, her voice laced with amusement. "Hard to believe you still don't trust me, Prince." I kept my expression cold. "We haven't done anything to establish trust yet, Priestess." Her lips curved into a teasing smile. She stepped closer, pressing her body into mine until her chest was flush against me, her hand trailing up to rest on my shoulder. Would you like to, then?" Her voice was low and sultry, her gaze laced with a dark glint of seduction. "Do something to establish trust, I mean." I clenched my jaw, staying still. The temptation was there, Visery's lust wanting to surface, but I could hold it in. "I didn't expect a Red Priestess to act like a bed slave," I said, my tone sharp. She laughed, tilting her head back, her breath warm against my skin. "I find it amusing how free you are with your words, even when they're directed at a High Priestess." Her fingers traced a line along my jaw. "If a true believer heard you say that, they might die from the shock alone. Perhaps after gutting you with a knife." "Well, I'm not a believer," I shot back, my gaze never wavering. And then I couldn't hold back any longer. My hand slid around her waist, pulling her close as she gasped softly, her eyes widening. "And if I recall right, you called me your king, didn't you? You should be fine with whatever I call you, bed slave or whatnot." For a moment, her expression was unreadable, her eyes searching mine as if looking for something deeper, something hidden. But then she smiled, her voice soft as silk. "Ah yes, Of course, she said, you're really different from what the rumors say. I released her, turning away to look out at the city again, needing a moment to pull myself back from the edge. I could feel her gaze on me, but I ignored it, focusing instead on the sprawling view beyond the walls. I need a ship, I said, breaking the silence. I have to return to Westeros. If you're worried about the Dothraki finding you, rest assured. Her voice was calm and reassuring as if she already had everything planned. They won't hear a word of your presence here. They'll never know where you are. I gave a skeptical snort, glancing over my shoulder. I'm aware of you Red Priestess powers, but still, you can't guarantee that. But fine, if you can help me keep my presence hidden for a few days, that'll do. I turned fully to face her, locking eyes with her again. I need your help to accomplish something in the next few days. After that, I'll leave for Westeros. Do you understand? She stared at me, her gaze unwavering, before a slow smile spread across her face. What is it, my king? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I called up the system, muttering inventory in my mind. A faint hologram appeared in the corner of my vision, a grid of small boxes filling the screen, only one of which was occupied. I slipped a hand into the bag hanging from my side, pretending to reach for something there, and grasped the object in the inventory with my mind. A moment later, the dragon egg appeared in my hand, its surface gleaming with red and black hues. Her eyes widened slightly, surprise flashing across her face as I held the egg up between us. A life for a life, I said, watching her reaction carefully. I, the last drop of dragon blood on this earth, intend to awaken the real dragons, to bring them back for the first time in 150 years. And your blood magic will help me do it. You understand? For a heartbeat, she was silent, her gaze fixed on the dragon egg as though it were a relic of her god himself. Her lips parted, and a faint shiver ran through her. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, one that grew into a wide, fervent grin. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with reverence. Azor Ahai. The thrill of manipulation tingled through me. Let her think I was the hero of prophecy. Let her think I was a god's chosen. I'd use her power, her belief, her devotion to achieve my ends. And if she ended up benefiting from that too, well, you're welcome. Kinvara had been a high priestess for more than a lifetime, long enough to watch faith bend and break men while she remained untouched. The Lord of Light had shown her visions, and she'd seen miracles burn to life in her hands. The faith of this religion held no mysteries from her, only truth, and she knew power. Real power. Naturally, only the one true God was truly powerful, but some men showed similar greatness as well. True power left marks in a person's soul, the kind that no robe, no pretense could mask. It made them appear strong, brave, and uncaring of death. She had met kings, commanders, and men with blood who claimed to match the dragons in their intensity, and she'd seen through them all. Some spoke the truth, but many wore masks of strength and held nothing of substance underneath. They were just men too afraid to face the emptiness inside, and according to the rumors she heard, according to what the flames had shown her, Viserys Targaryen was no different, a shadow of his bloodline, clinging to something he could barely comprehend. So she expected a coward. She expected weakness cloaked in arrogance when she decided to meet him. But when she did meet him at the inn, it was a different story. There had been something opposite in his eyes, the sharp edge to his words, that mind that didn't waver in the face of threats, daring to wield a knife, not out of stupidity, but braveness against her. Perhaps he had once been that weak prince that the rumors spoke of, but he wasn't anymore. The incident of overcoming his death and his fate must have changed him. She'd seen that change before, usually forged across years of hard battle, but he had earned it overnight. A cautious, dangerous man. It was something she'd been trained to recognize, a potential. Kinvara hoped her experienced senses weren't wrong. Because Melisandre, that bitch, had apparently found the warrior of light. And Kinvara wasn't going to let that wench overshine her another time. She was hoping Viserys was the true warrior, and if he wasn't, she'd shape him to be. Then, the two of them will receive the blessing of the one true God together. The whole week, a smirk stayed in her thoughts as she searched and prepared for what he demanded. Awakening dragon eggs, she nearly laughed when he first proposed it. Her instinct was to dismiss him, but she held back. Do you think the Targaryens wouldn't have done it before, if it were possible? Contrary to people's belief, the Targaryens were mad enough to try anything, such as blood magic, and, indeed, they had already done so many times in the last 300 years. And yet, the dragons had not returned. If his entire family failed for 300 years, how could he succeed? Kandara was curious to see. So she didn't question him, nor did she voice her doubt. The flicker of something real in his eyes kept her silent. So, then, let's see the worth behind your words. For he was a mystery worth her time, for now. They were riding together now, their horses pushing forward through deadened lands twisted by smoke and darkness. The air grew thicker the nearer they came to the city of Mantares, the edge of the Valerian freehold in the distance, a decayed remnant of what had once been the heart of the empire. The land bore history, the mark of corruption, a stain that seemed to stretch forever. "How are you holding up, Prince?" Kinvera asked, breaking the silence that had been settling between them for too long. She kept her gaze forward, but she could feel him beside her, hear the hooves of his horse before he even spoke. "The stench is bothersome," he muttered, hand briefly at his nose. "But I'm managing." He patted his horse, a white beast, elegant and striking. She looked at the horse briefly. He'd named it Danny White, of all things, a strange choice given his sister's nickname was Danny. Was this his idea of humiliating the Khaleesi? Or was this his way of showing affection? Kinvera couldn't tell. "The stench is the least of our worries here, near Mantares," she replied, looking out at the twisted horizon ahead as if the city itself were bending and shifting in the shadows. He only raised an eyebrow, casting her a look of skepticism. What could possibly be worse? She almost laughed. "Mantares is no ordinary city, Prince," she replied smoothly. "It lies to the southeast of Volantis, at the very edge of the smoking sea. The doom of Valyria left its deepest scars here. The land around it has been poisoned by old sorceries, dark magic lingering long after Valyria fell." He glanced over, half amused. "Speaking of magic, I'm curious since people always said Targaryens had it in their blood. Are there other forms to it other than blood magic? Maybe I can learn them." Sometimes, she'd realized this the past week they'd been traveling, she couldn't be sure if he was truly curious about something or just asking her to seem stupid. Regardless, she answered in her usual tone. "To be fair, the claim of magic in Targaryen blood remains to be proven," she replied, though she knew it used to be true back in the day. "But the people of Mantares are different. They are deformations, monsters, some would say. Some say they bear the mark of the doom in their very flesh." He snorted. "Sounds like a nursery tale." Again, he seemed to be lying. Her unmatched experience in human nature told her that he was lying. That he indeed believed her. But why was he lying then? Sometimes, he showed her less than what he was for some reason. "Perhaps," she said, shrugging. "But Mantares has a sinister reputation across the land. It's known that horrific deformities are common among its people, mutations, twisted limbs, strange growths. It could be the lingering effects of the doom, or perhaps just the result of old sorcery gone wrong." She shot him a glance. "Either way, travelers avoid Mantares whenever they can. That's why we're doing the same, despite the high number of witches we can find there. Good thing I'm not one to be frightened by ghost stories. Besides," he added, his smirk widening, "I've got R'hllor's favorite priestess by my side. Shouldn't that count for something? I think they'll be scared by you." She laughed at the comment, the faintest smile on her lips as her eyes drifted to the road ahead. "At least he's growing more relaxed around me. I think they'll be more scared of you instead. You're building muscles from those exercises you've been doing all the time that you're not riding the horse," she said. "I hope so," he replied, his gaze focused ahead. That is, just a short distance away, she could see the faint outline of a village, barely discernible through the haze. "That's the place I told you about," she said. Smoke curled from the tops of low buildings, filling the air with the acrid scent of charred wood and dust. They slowed as they approached, drawing the attention of villagers who peered at them with wary eyes. Huts rose, and kids hid behind them. Everyone's gazes lingered on Kinvera's red robes, and one by one, they murmured among themselves, some bowing, others nodding with reverence. The awe in their expressions was expected. That was the influence she wielded in Essos. Kinvera dismounted, letting her gaze sweep over the gathered faces, seeking the one she had come for. "Yara Veshdul," she called, and there a woman stood just at the edge of the crowd, her face marked by age and hardship. The woman blinked, looking around to make sure it was her name that was called. Her clothes were ragged, the lines of fatigue etched deeply into her features. "Me, Milady, the Maegi asked, and Kinvara nodded. Yes, you. Come, Prince, she turned to Viserys and murmured, who too dismounted from his horse. He approached the woman, who eyed the two of them with a mix of awe and fear. A moment later the old woman dipped her head low, hands clasped tightly together as she stepped forward, her body trembling as she came before Kinvara. Her hair was a mess of tangles streaked with gray, and her hands were rough, calloused from years of hard labor. She'll do, Viserys said, his eyes examining her. Kinvara wondered what someone who knew nothing of blood magic could see. Regardless, the decision was not hers to make. Her gaze softened just enough to appear kind as she spoke. The great Lord of Light has chosen you, Kinvara intoned. The Lord has a purpose for you, a deed that will bring you closer to his eternal flame. Her words were flowery, but her tone did not present it as an offer. It left no room for refusal. Say your goodbyes and prepare to leave with us. The woman's gaze darted to the side, her eyes meeting those of her children, a few grandchildren standing timidly behind them. She swallowed and hesitated. Kinvara understands her hesitation, the ache of someone bound by earthly ties. It is a look she has seen countless times before. Go ahead, look all you want, she sighed, thinking with detached patience. But when the gods call, no mortal bonds can keep you. She knew the woman would come. Despite her fear, despite the hollow in her eyes as she met her children's gaze one last time, the call of faith would be stronger. It always was. And, indeed, without a word of protest, she gathered her things and joined them, as Kinvara knew she would. The materials for the Dragon Awakening ritual were ready. Image here. Author note edit oops, overestimated the current follower count. It's doing really well in QQ, so I thought it was doing great here in WN2. Anyways, since 1H seems impossible so far, we'll hold off it. Just vote for now, more chapters will keep dropping. 38 comments 0 vote. 5 Waking the Dragon. Chapter 5. Waking the Dragon. We rode in silence. The only sound that accompanied us was the rhythmic drumming of hooves against the cracked, unforgiving soil of old Valyria. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, a sour tang that clung to the back of my throat and refused to let go. It was annoying. It seemed as if this land had forgotten what life felt like, choosing instead to stew in its own rotten misery. Mantares was a city known for its corruption and twisted tales of horror, where the doom of Valyria danced in the breath of wind. We weren't heading toward the city. We were simply passing by it, closer than earlier, and yet, the dread in the air was pressing down like a suffocating blanket. Kinvara rode beside me, her crimson robes fluttering gently, contrasting with the ashen landscape. We made small talk as we walked. The old witch, Yara Vesh'dul, rode just beyond her, muttering quiet prayers to gods I didn't care to know. My mind spun with thoughts of the ritual to come. It wasn't fear that stirred within me but anticipation. I was impatient. After all, this incident, if successful, would create history. Quest. Waking the Dragon. The awakening of a dragon. The system pushed me towards it. After all, what was the point of a dragon system without a dragon? Still, it was a dangerous quest. If I succeeded, I would claim power that had been dead for centuries. But failure, it would turn me into ash. So I guess I was kind of nervous too. My fingers flexed around the reins, eyes narrowing at the thought. The Targaryen family line, fire and blood, that was how a dragon could be awakened. They've tried to do that before, many times so, and failed regardless. I didn't plan to fail. The ritual wanted blood, my blood. If the preparation wasn't perfect, I could die. The idea sent a shiver up my spine, an odd mix of exhilaration and dread. Was I ready to endure the flames to prove that the dragon blood in my veins was not false? A thin smile tugged at my lips. Of course, I was ready. What was life without the risk of losing it? Prince. A laugh broke through my thoughts. The guttural noise cut through the call of Kinvara, who looked at me with a raised eyebrow. I glanced up to see her, and she nudged her chin forward. We have company, she said. Stone men. Ah, I glanced ahead and frowned. I saw deformed men slinking out from the shadows between jagged rocks, their twisted figures glistening with sweat and grime. All of their skin, a large part of it not all, were turned to stone. That wasn't the only thing mutated about them. They didn't look like normal people. Population of Mantares, I believe. Bandits. Some had limbs that bent the wrong way, eyes that bulged too far out of their sockets, or ears where no ears should ever be. Mantary's famed mutations were not just stories told to frighten children, it seemed. The person leading them, a man with a third eye perched grotesquely on his cheekbone, grinned, showing a mouth full of broken teeth. It was gross. Half the skin in his body had turned to stone. "Oh, ho, good lord," he said, his gaze leering at Kinvera with hunger. "A red priestess. Haven't had one of your kind in some time." "But boss, it's a red priestess," one of the bandits muttered, a glimmer of doubt on his face. The leader spat, a thick glob that landed near his feet. "Oh, you newbie, so what if she's a red priestess? She got a cunt just like any other woman," he barked, and a chorus of laughter followed. It was an ugly and eager sound. I shook my head, my face still, though my muscles tightened with barely contained disdain. "I was wondering how people in Mantaries survived without trade or merchants," I said, raising my voice enough for Kinvera to hear over the laughter. My gaze never left the approaching figures. "Well, this is how," Kinvera replied, a sigh threading her words. "Plundering and robbing travelers." Beside us, the old witch's muttering grew louder, prayers turning feverish as the bandits encircled us. 14. I counted quickly, my eyes flicking from one twisted face to another. They outnumbered us, and they were confident, circling their prey with the arrogance of men who'd done this many times before. "Dismount from your horses," the leader shouted, wielding a rusted sword. The others mimicked him, grins full of yellow teeth and broken promises. I glanced at Kinvera, and she looked back. We exchanged silent glances. We slid off our horses, boots meeting the ground with a thud. The bandits jeered, yanking our horses away and closing in on us, their stench seeping into the air like a disease. "Gross bastards. Should we kill the man, boss?" one of the lackeys asked, his voice too high-pitched and eager. The leader shook his head, chuckling. "Nah, he got a pretty face. Some pig in the slave cities will pay good coin for him." The laughter that followed pushed me to the edge of my ever-growing annoyance. "They're dead already," I scoffed, turning to Kinvera as I spoke out loud. "Can you start the ritual now, if I make fire?" I asked her, turning my eyes to the men as they exchanged confused glances. Kinvera blinked, confusion and surprise flickering across her face before she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. I turned my attention back to the bandits, a smile forming. "Do any of you know blood magic?" I asked. They stared, confusion warping their faces before one broke into a hoarse laugh. "Ha, this dumb motherfucker thinks we're wizards." Another hooted. "We won't be raping people like you if we were." "Pity," I muttered and slipped a hand into my pocket. The leader snapped to attention, raising his weapon. "Hands out, or I'll cut them off," he snarled, swinging his blade. I obliged, slowly lifting my hand, palm open. I guess I had no other choice. I wanted to keep it a secret from Kinvera for a bit longer, but whatever. One moment my palm was empty, and then a glass filled with strange liquid shimmered into existence, cool and weighty in my grasp. The sudden appearance caught their laughter and died in their throats. Before they could react, I tossed the liquid onto the leader. He flinched back, some of the liquid splattering across his face and chest. His brows furrowed, confusion turning to rage. "What was that, you?" A burning torch appeared in my hand next, summoned from my inventory as if I'd always carried it in my hand. "It is called naphtha," I said as I threw the fire at him, the flames roaring to life. He tried to shout, but the flames consumed him and leapt to the men closest to him. Their screams shredded the silence, a song of agony as fire crawled over them, skin blistering and blackening. "Now," I snapped at Kinvera. "How?" She looked momentarily stunned at what I had done. Even she couldn't bring things out of thin air. Yet she managed to move her hands through her surprise, making gestures with the practiced precision of a sorceress. Her hands weaved the flames outward and guided them into the throng of bandits, who shrieked and fell like burning dolls. The smell of charred flesh thickened the air. "Why, you bastards!" One man who was untouched by the flames rushed at me with a roar, eyes wide and white with fury. "Fool," I said, "he should have known that I might have more in my space." I kept a lot of things in my inventory, things I had asked Kinvera to provide me before we left Volantis. A spear formed in my hand, a better choice than a sword for a newbie such as myself. I thrust it forward, steel meeting resistance as it plunged through his chest. It wasn't very smooth, but it did its work. His charge faltered, breath rattling out as blood trickled from his gaping mouth. I pulled the spear free, and he collapsed, lifeless. "You've killed a stone man. You've earned experience points," You've leveled up. You've reached level 6. Oh, I whispered, the notification catching me off guard. That was my first kill in this world. I had gained 3 levels in the last week, working out with my body weight every chance I got, which basically meant every minute I wasn't riding the horse. All that hard work, and I had only gained 3 levels. But now, I killed a man and gained a level in a second. A tremor of power ran through me. The system rewarded me for killing. The rest of the bandits writhed, still engulfed by flames, their screams reaching a fever pitch. I frowned. It was unclear if I'd get experience points from their deaths as they were burning in the fire of ritual, spread by Kinvana, even if it was me who started the fire first. The urge to finish them off surged through me. A disgusting scent of burning flesh filled the air, mixing with heat. I could feel the flames pressing in, ready to consume everything, including me. I decided and then moved quickly, spear stabbing down into faces and hearts, silencing each scream with a conclusiveness that resonated in my chest. The notifications from the system blurred my vision, rapid-fire confirmations of each kill and experience points. You've killed a stone man. You've earned experience points. You've killed a stone man. You've earned experience points. You've leveled up. You've killed a stone man. You've earned experience points. You've killed a stone man. You've earned experience points. You've leveled up. You've leveled up. You've reached level 9. Prince, let's step out of that place. Kinvera's sharp and frantic voice cut through the inferno. She stood at the edge of the flames, her face flushed from the heat, her eyes filled with urgency. It's dangerous. I looked at her, the world around me reduced to the roar of flames and the thrum of blood in my ears. I wondered for a moment and then pulled something from the system. A hovering hologram in the corner of my vision gleamed with an ethereal blue light. Quest. Waking the dragon. Objective. Awaken the dormant dragon egg and restore the legacy of House Targaryen by bringing a true dragon into the world. Details. You, Viserys Targaryen, have embarked on a quest that few would dare to dream of. To awaken the dragon egg in his possession, you must perform a ritual of fire and blood magic, a process steeped in ancient Valyrian tradition and arcane knowledge. This ritual is perilous, requiring precision, sacrifice, and the true fire of the old gods. Ritual site, conducted in a sacred or ancient power-infused place. Blood glyphs, drawn around the pyre using blood to channel magic. Blood sacrifice, a soul of great quality, or of many quantities, must be offered, willing or bound by fate. Additionally, a blood witch has to be offered. Chanting, the blood witch who's being sacrificed must chant and guide the magic. If not, a second blood mage can chant from outside. Higher ignition, egg placed at the center, surrounded by sacred flames. Flame endurance, you, Viserys, must step into the fire to prove your worth as the dragon. Embrace the egg, endure the fire, and sacrifice a number of your levels to bring it to life. Rewards. Dragon Hatchling. A creature of unmatched power and influence who'll see you as its parent. Title, the Dragon King, enhances reputation and fire resistance. Stat boost. Level ups. +5 end, +3 STR. New, +10 authority. Penalties for failure. Injury, death. Severe burns or death. Loss of the egg, irreplaceable loss. Broken alliance, loss of Kinvera's support. Title, false heir, damaged reputation, harder to gain allies. I took a deep breath, my pulse hammering like a war drum. No, I replied, leaving her staring at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. Prince, this is madness. Her voice wavered, split between urgency and something else. Worry. No, I told myself. High priestesses didn't worry, they plotted. Is it? Yes. Targaryens are not immune to flames. This isn't a story, and you're not. Trust me. The grin that stretched my lips felt foreign, forced even, but I needed her to believe it. The flames that burned around me hurt me. I felt the heat, but it stopped hurting when the ritual began. I could tell, if this didn't work, I'd be nothing but a charred corpse and a forgotten fool. The author of the franchise once stated that Daenerys Targaryen's survival of the ritual fire was a one-time incident. It was because it was a ritual that she didn't get hurt. Unlike what she came to believe, she wasn't immune to flames. My death to the molten gold also didn't mean I lacked dragon blood. I could do the exact thing she did as long as the ritual proceeded. The flames were here, so the ritual could indeed proceed. I just had to endure for a while. I looked at her, her worried face flashing from behind the dancing flames. She could stop the flames if she tried. From the looks of it, she was just about to. Don't. I stopped her. If I die here, then I'm no more than a fool who pretended to be a king. Not the warrior of light, not anything worth remembering for you, no. The silence that followed was heavy, and I saw her mouth press into a tight line. Good. Doubt made people easier. I nodded toward the first body, the bandit whose eyes were still frozen in that moment of disbelief. Use that one. Fresh blood. Draw the glyphs. For a heartbeat, Kinvera stared at me, eyes unreadable, before her gaze hardened, becoming sharper and colder. Her fingers twitched, and with a practiced motion, she opened her hand and then closed it into a fist. The body convulsed, a grotesque shudder, before the skin split open, and blood surged out, painting the ground in curving intricate strokes. It spread like a living map, forming symbols that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I brought the dragon egg out of my inventory. It thrummed in my hands. Oh my, the old witch gasped. She had been staring at me in stunned silence from the moment I took out the glass and the spear out of thin air. She was trembling. Her eyes were wide, trembling as though she were on the edge of a vision. She seemed to have reached a realization of her own. Go inside, Kinvera pushed her gently. Ahor Ahai is waiting for you. Azor Ahai, she breathed, and I saw Ah twisting her lined face into something grotesque. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She walked into the flame, her skin churning off as she walked closer to me. The flames roared around us, fed by the dead, reaching higher as though trying to touch the sky. Heat wrapped itself around my body like a lover with sharp teeth. I gripped the egg tighter, feeling its cool, solid weight. It was the last relic of a lineage too proud to stay buried. I stepped closer to the inferno, my boots scraping against the blood-slick ground. The flames concentrated around me while the witch touched her forehead on the ground. She started to chant. Kinvera's gaze flickered between me and the fire, her mouth opening as if to speak, but she said nothing. Good. Words wouldn't change anything now. The heat stole my breath, pain flowering across my skin as I settled cross-legged on the ground, the egg cradled in my arms. I closed my eyes, the witch's chanting weaving through the crackling of flames, the edges of my mind fraying with each second. Every nerve screamed, and my teeth ground together, a snarl tearing itself free as the fire wrapped around me. But somewhere in that agony, where the edges of life and death met, the egg in my arms throbbed, warm, hungry, and alive. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell how long passed. The flames obscured the sky, I couldn't even tell if the sun had set or not. My focus was all here as the system flashed notifications before me. The dragon egg is asking for food. Would you like to feed it 5 levels? Yes, no. The choice was simple. The fire burned brighter, and Kinvera's chanting grew louder outside. Something cracked. Intel. Creech, creech. A sharp cry pierced the fire, something small and fierce. Warmth brushed my cheek, different from the searing pain. It was a rough tongue that licked at my skin, pulling me back from the abyss. My eyes cracked open to see 2 bright, wild eyes staring back at me as a winged golden lizard croaked on my arms. The flames died out slowly as the sun rose in the morning sky. Kinvera walked over, eyes wide and trembling, while a crazy grin quivered on her lips. She muttered a curse, followed by a gasp of moan. Oh, my God, it's a dragon. Quote. It was. I had awakened it, a golden little thing, a gold dragon with separate arms and wings. Viserion, the dragon who'd become the strongest. The most powerful. Image here. Author note. I hope you like the story so far, if so throw us power stones for more updates, faster updates. I was wondering which dragon to choose among the 3. I was urged to go with Drogon, but in the end, I chose Viserion to allow Daenerys to keep some personal power. Plus Viserion was the dragon that was named after Viserys, it's only natural that it should be the egg he stole. Question. Future dragon girl or nah? Do we just keep it as a pet? 6 Future plans and the solution to Viserys' problem. Chapter 6. Future plans and the solution to Viserys' problem. The steam rose lazily around me, curling into the vaulted ceiling, where it dissipated like ghosts. The bathwater was heated just shy of scorching, soaking into my muscles, pulling out aches I hadn't realized were there. My eyes fell to the tiny, gold-scaled creature perched on my chest. Viserion, my dragon, snapped her jaws playfully, emitting a high-pitched screech that echoed through the chamber. I smirked and reached into the air beside me. The empty space rippled as my fingers closed around a chunk of cured meat drawn from the invisible folds of my inventory. "Here," I said, offering the meat to her. She sniffed it, eyes narrowing for a heartbeat before she lunged, tearing into it with sharp, eager bites. "She's so adorable," I said to myself. I didn't know how genders worked for dragons of this world, and this creature didn't have any obvious trait that confirmed its gender. But I knew she-dragons were a thing. Dragons that lay eggs, so I'd decided to call her she in the hope that it'd become one and make more dragons for me in the future. But I'd feel stupid if calling it a she didn't do anything, and it turned out to be a man. Blood dripped down the edge of her maw, staining her golden scales with streaks of red. I laughed, a low, hollow sound that seemed to bounce off the marble walls. A dragon. I had a dragon. The weight of what I'd accomplished was finally beginning to sink in. I had fully accepted the reality that I was in the world of Game of Thrones, and now I had a dragon as my companion. That ritual steeped in blood and fire had borne fruit. Or rather, it had hatched one. The possibilities swirled through my mind like the steam around me. I had awakened as an exiled prince with nothing but a name, but that had changed fast. Now I had power. Real power, where I could melt cities with my personal nuke. A dragon was more than a symbol. It was an instrument of conquest. Although, it got me thinking. What did this mean for me? For my plans? I wanted to leave Essos because I feared the Dothraki's wrath. Compared to that, if I just dyed my hair black, I should be fine in Westeros. But now, I had a dragon. Should I still leave Essos? The question gnawed at me. Even if I dyed my hair, Westeros would welcome me with nothing but open swords since I had a dragon at my side. But there were also insane benefits. The game changed. I could wait out a few years and then go to Westeros. By that time, my Viserion should be large enough to melt cities. Certainly, that was a choice better than going with a baby dragon. Essos had its advantages too. The web of politics that I could twist to my favor thanks to Kinvera's support, the wealth, and the freedom to grow stronger without eyes watching my every move. I could also make an army for myself. Initially, I had no desire for the Iron Throne, but now. The flames from the ritual were seared into my memory, but the scent of power, the burnt iron rich and intoxicating scent, lingered even stronger. When I fled from the Dothraki, I only wanted to survive. That had been my goal. Now, things were a lot different. So many choices. I'd need a bit of time to decide. The sharp sound of approaching footsteps pulled me from my thoughts. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Kinvera's presence filled the room before she did, an aura of heat and purpose. She moved like a dancer, cloaked in light crimson robes. She stopped at the edge of the water, eyes dark with something unreadable. She reached out a hand, grabbing her dress on the cut near the shoulder. Image here. With one slow, fluid motion, the robe fell away, pooling at her feet. My gaze followed the curve of her hips, the dip of her waist, the flawless skin that gleamed under the dim torchlight. And of course, those magnificent breasts. What a strange world this was. She somehow looked much hotter than the Hollywood actress who'd played her in the show. She slid into the water, the ripples gliding over her like silk. I watched in silence as she sat, too far away, the steam obscuring half of her face. "Why so far?" I said, my tone teasing but edged with command. I patted the water on my right. "Come, sit beside me. The water's too cool, warm me up." A smirk ghosted across her lips before she pushed herself forward, the hot water parting for her. She crawled with the slow precision of a predator, stopping when she was between my legs, her back pressing into my chest. The heat of her body matched the warmth of the water, and she tilted her head back slightly, resting it against my shoulder. "Oh," I muttered, more to myself than to her. The sensation of her skin against mine sent a shiver across my body, urging me to lean down and devour her. "What a gorgeous slut." She murmured, her voice smooth and rich as she feigned ignorance. Even my cute dragon, sitting on my shoulder, didn't trust her tone. "Do you want me to move away?" "No," I replied, a lazy smile across my face. "Stay." I raised a hand as my fingers snapped together with a sharp crack. The sound reverberated, and a dark portal shimmered open in the air. Viserion screeched in annoyance, talons scratching at my chest in protest. "Inside," I whispered, nudging her gently. The dragon's golden eyes narrowed a defiant glare that lasted only a moment as I frowned. I said inside. She flapped her wings, hovering briefly before darting into the dark void. The portal closed with a soft, final snap, and the room fell into a sudden silence. Kinvera's gaze turned up to me, her eyes smoldering with something deeper than desire. I've never seen someone split open the space. Oh my, these powers of yours, she bit her lip, almost involuntarily. Her eyes searched mine, and for a second, I saw the hunger there, a hunger not unlike Visirion's. I stared down, smirking, waiting to see if she had the guts to take the lead. It turned out that she didn't, as she looked ahead, smiling to herself. But my prince, are you sure it's wise to be so strict with it? She asked. Dragons are notoriously difficult to tame. Maybe you should show it love instead. I leaned back, letting the warmth of the bath seep into my bones. And yes, I'm very sure. My voice was low but confident. I wasn't lying. The dark space I sent Visirion to wasn't just any ordinary place. It was the House of Dragons, a skill that came with my newfound title, the Dragon King. It was more than just another inventory. It was a sanctuary for my dragons, a realm where they could rest and hide without any issues. The quest rewards were very useful. I looked forward to my next quest. With a thought, I summoned the system page. There were now 3 pages. Page ===. Viserys Targaryen, the Dragon King. 22 years old, level 6, - 9 STR, 13 End, 6 Dex, 11 Int. 11 Luke, 12 Off. Page ===. I had dropped to level 4 after sacrificing 5 levels to awaken the dragon. Then, I gained 2 levels for awakening a dragon. Level 6 wasn't bad. I was stronger than a bodybuilder in my past life. More than that, the Authority 14 stat was interesting. I didn't exactly know what it did, but if I had to guess then it made my orders have more impact. As for the Dragon King part of the page, clicking it opened another page. The second page, it followed when I nudged it with my mind, detailing my newly acquired status and abilities. Page ===. Class, the Dragon King. Skills, Dragon Management System S, House of Dragons S, Fire Resistance E. Page ===. I finally had skills. It was sad that I couldn't gain skills by running and swinging a sword, unlike other gamers that I'd read about, but I'd take it. Class skills were fun. Clicking them showed their details. Fire resistance was self-explanatory, although it was at a low rank of E. I hoped to raise it to S someday, which I presumed was the max rank. The House of Dragons was a spatial space where my dragons could rest, and unlike my inventory, the time didn't freeze here. The first skill was something that had another dedicated page for it. It was the page that I scrutinized most. I clicked it, and it expanded before me. Page ===. Dragon Management System S. You can manage your dragons here. You can see their location, hunger rate, and also their respect toward you. You currently own 1 dragon, Visirion. Location, Volantis, Essos. Hunger, 100% respect, 98%. Page ===. The location, if clicked, showed more accurately in my mini-map. It was quite useful since dragons had a tendency to run wild after growing a little. Hunger was also useful, I guess. But it was the last status that caught my attention. The respect meter had dropped by 2% from what I remembered. I guessed that if it dipped too low, there would be consequences. There was a saying that fear and respect were better than love, and it was truer for dragons. Funny story, I said, a hand resting on Kinvera's thigh. Yes, there was this man who owned a dog. This man preferred men in his bed, and he liked to be the one getting stabbed. So one day, his dog saw him getting fucked hard by another man. I said, and she giggled, leaning into my arms. No, really, real story. Yeah, go on. Basically, after the dog saw his owner get fucked by another man, seeing him moan and cry, the dog stopped listening to his owner. Since then, whenever the man ordered the dog to do something, the dog has disobeyed and even seemed to make fun of the man all the time. The man was sad at the development that his dog stopped taking him seriously, but if you ask me, what did he expect after getting found by his dog, moaning for another man? All the respect was gone from the dog. Kinvera burst out laughing while I continued, so, wild animals, be it dogs or dragons, need to be treated strictly. They also need to be shown the strong side of their master to maintain respect. Love isn't going to keep them loyal forever. To be fair, love might work for a dog, they're loyal creatures, but not a dragon, she said, looking up at me with her head tilted upward, a hand reaching out to caress my face. You think right, I replied, squeezing her thigh softly. Kinvera smiled. I still can't believe it. You pulled an egg out of thin air and made it live. Her eyes were half-lidded, calculating. This odd power of yours, she didn't finish the thought, but I saw the questions burning in her expression. I chuckled softly. There's a lot to believe, Kinvera. And trust me, it's just the beginning. I'd prefer if you stop questioning everything because there's a lot more to come. Kinvera stared up, lips slightly parted. Her gaze was hazy. Biting her lower lip, she shifted between my legs, the heat of the bath pressing around us like a second skin. I felt her move, the water lapping softly as if caught between our breaths. My hands found her waist, fingers tracing the curve that led upward, pausing as I felt the rise and fall of her chest. She let out a small laugh, a sound that broke the silence with an edge of mischief. I thought you preferred distance, she murmured, tilting her head back just enough for our eyes to meet. The faintest hint of a smirk played on her lips, daring me. I thought you had a problem down there, my prince, the way you were pushing me away. Now I feel wronged. I tightened my grip, her soft curve melting on my hands, feeling the heat prickle my skin. There are moments for distance, I said as I leaned in until my breath warmed her ear, and moments for this. I had a problem. My libido was too strong. I need a cure. Thankfully, I had an answer to that. I just had to release my libido regularly so as not to let it bother me. And I just happened to have a super hot woman wiggling on my arms right now. Her eyes sparkled with amusement and surprise. Before she could answer, I kissed her, the touch rough at first, testing. Her lips met mine, surprised for a moment before it went soft and eager. She melted into something deeper and hungrier. The steam around us thickened, turning the room into a cocoon of heat and shadows as we made out in it. My hands moved with purpose, tracing the smooth expanse of her skin, feeling the slight shiver that ran through her as I explored. Every shift, every small intake of breath from her only fueled the atmosphere building between us. She was begging for it. I want you, my prince. Your king, I corrected her, a hand slapping her boobs. She gasped and then laughed. Maybe you'd want your dragon to see this, she said, giving me a slutty look. If I'm right, you're about to destroy me, aren't you? I bet you'd love that. I leaned in and bit her nape and then snapped a finger. The house of dragons opened, and the dragon flew out. I was going to do what she said. I threw a piece of meat on the other side of the room, and Viserion flew toward it, munching on it. I shifted all my focus to Kinvera next. She shifted, her body pressing back, teasing as her mouth left mine and a finger traced the line of my jaw. Her gaze held mine, dark with lust. My hands roamed her body, exploring every curve and line as if it were a territory I was claiming. Her skin was smooth and slick under my touch, the warmth of the water intensifying the sensation. I could feel her rapid and strong heartbeat echoing my own, her moans rhyming with my groans. Embrace me already, my king, she said, and I slowly adjusted her position, lifting her in the water slightly so that she was poised above my cock. Her eyes met mine, a mix of anticipation and challenge in their depths. I held her gaze as I lowered her onto me, watching her expression change from playful to passionate. 9. She moaned, squirming between my legs, her breath hitching as I filled her completely. Her pussy clamped around my cock warmly. I hadn't realized how warm she was until now. It was odd. The sensation was overwhelming, but I relished it. The power of the Lord of Light pulsed within her, embracing me as if to please me with her all. The blend of pleasure and power sent waves of heat through my body. I began to move, thrusting into her with a steady, deliberate rhythm, my hands gripping her hips to guide her movements. Oh, yes, that's it, her moans filled the air, a symphony of desire that urged me to go harder. I felt her body responding to mine, her cunt clenching around me, drawing me deeper. The water churned around us, the splashing sounds mingling with our ragged breaths and whispered endearments. After a while, she let out a harrowing moan as she came for me, eyes locking on the ceiling. I was also close, so I stood, lifting her with me, our bodies still joined. I couldn't come in that position since then I'd have to come inside her. Bend over, I said and turned her around, bending her over the side of the pool. She gasped, her hands gripping the edge for support as I entered her from behind. I just came, she complained, and in response, my fingers tangled in her hair, pulling it hard as I slipped back it. I thrust hard, beginning to fuck her with renewed intensity. So you should be grateful your king's giving you such a good cock, I growled as her ass jiggled for me, watching her moan. You like this, don't you? She let out a hungry moan, her body arching back to meet my thrusts. Yes, she breathed, her voice barely more than a whisper. Yes, I do. More. Fuck me more. I could feel the tension building within me, the pressure mounting as I drove into her again and again. I leaned down and kissed her, releasing her hair. She stood up, pushing back against my chest, her body trembling with the force of her own pleasure, her hands reaching back up to grasp my shoulders as we continued kissing. Come inside me, she whispered, her voice laced with a desperate plea. Please, inside. I paused for a bit. Then, with a swift, sharp movement, I slapped her ass. It was harsh, and the sound echoed through the chamber. She yelped, both in surprise and pain, her eyes wide as she looked back at me. Be careful what you wish for, I warned, my voice low. I know what you're up to. She stared at me with a panting expression and then pouted as if she were a kid. No way was she just waving it off by acting cute. Well, she did look cute, excluding the hot, raw, and primal desire in her eyes. I pulled out, busting all over her back. Her back looked like a canvas where I painted a rain of white. She moaned, gasping for me as she came again. Let's move to the bed, she murmured a moment later, her voice soft and inviting, as she turned back and kissed me deeply. I hugged her, groping her fat ass, and pushed her on her back against the stone floor. Not yet, I said, and started destroying her again. Author note. So Viserion is a she-dragon, capable of laying eggs. I got some mixed results on the dragon girl or not, question not really mixed, mostly one-sided, so there most likely will not be any human form dragon girl. Just see the dragon as the cool fire lizard she is. And thank you for the stones, we're rising much higher. 38 comments 0 vote. 7. The Second Sons. Chapter 7. The Second Sons. I stood by the window of my bedroom. Red Temple's highest floors provided a beautiful view, I had to admit. The moon lighted my face while the night breeze ruffled my hair. I watched the distant stars, my gaze looking at the unfamiliar canvas. Even the stars looked different from Earth. I recognized none of the constellations. This place wasn't some distant planet in a distant galaxy or even a parallel world. It was a whole other universe. I missed Earth sometimes. I wasn't someone important back in that place, but it was still home. I guess this is my home now, even with my 22 years of memory as Viserys, that seemed a hard truth to swallow. But at least I managed to swallow it at all. You seem lost, my king, a soft voice, so melodic that men might mistake it for a song, called from behind. I didn't turn. Warm hands wrapped around me from behind as a warm, naked body pressed against my shirtless back. Kinvera hugged me, resting her head on my back. She was showing incredible affection after my performance from yesterday morning till tonight. Just 13 points in end, and I could go for almost 2 days. It helped that she was hot as fuck, too. Stargazing. Your expression is too melancholic for just that, no? She asked, and I shrugged. She huffed. More than stars, why not appreciate that red line? She peeked from my shoulders and pointed at the red comet. The red lines that painted a part of the sky. It had been days, but it hadn't vanished. It had come to be when the dragon egg hatched, and it remained still. It was heaven's announcement that a dragon was born. People are making so many different theories about that, she said. Someday they'd know the truth. Someday. Speaking of that, when are you planning to reveal your dragons? If you do that, a lot of noble families from Westeros will show you their support, Kinvera said. I put a hand behind me, yanking her arm, and made her sit on the window. Leaning in and kissing her, I pulled back as she smirked. You could have just said it if you wanted me to shut up. You're a smart woman, I smiled back. So stop saying dumb stuff. Just my name would earn me 1,000 assassins. And if my enemies learn that I own a dragon now, King Robert 2 weeks ago, and Ned Stark will get executed tomorrow. Robert Baratheon wants my sister dead simply because she carries Drogo's child. His son will sit on the throne, and he will not hesitate to send an army to kill me and my dragon. Ha, you're very aware of the political situation, Kinvera said. Then what are you planning? Do you plan to hide your dragon in that dark space forever? She's a wild creature. She needs to spread her wings to become bigger. To become helpful to you. Not forever. I'll let Viserion fly soon, I said. As for my plans, I plan to go to Westeros and ally myself with Dorne. I was engaged to Princess Arianne Martell 17 years ago. It was only broken because I had to flee Westeros after Robert took the throne. The Dornish are still loyal to my house. They'll accept me, especially when I show my dragon to them. They won't leak the information either. But as sure as I am, there can always be variables. So I'll need an army to fix that. To make them trust me more. A dragon is a solid bargain. For the last 300 years, it was armies that won war, not dragons. There's no way around it. I explained myself, and she hummed. Have you thought of the Unsullied? Have you decided to lend me 10,000 gold coins to buy them? She smiled cheekily and looked away. Unfortunately, the money of the Church of Light isn't mine to spend, my dearest king. That's what I thought. I shook my head and sighed. Even if she saw me as a Horahai, she wasn't the only high priestess in the world. She couldn't do as she pleased. Plus, I didn't want to rely on her too much. I'm planning to take on the Second Sons. The Second Sons, like many mercenary companies, had a strong tradition of following strength and leadership. If someone defeated their leaders, it was likely that they would follow the new leader, as these companies respected power and the ability to command. She raised an eyebrow at my words, and I explained, most members of the Second Sons are sons of landless lords or scions of houses to which they are not heirs. But the majority of them still want their names written off in the pages of history. I am aware, she nodded. If a king comes to them, bearing the blood of conquerors, praised by a high priestess, an exiled prince with a dragon resting on his shoulders, he'd likely be able to earn their loyalty after defeating their leaders. Luckily I seem to fit all those criteria. After defeating, you say, she repeated. Forgive my rudeness, my king, but as impressive as your spear's performance in bed was, you aren't a warrior. Leaders of Second Sons are incredible warriors. I've seen them fight. You're sure you'll win? I smirked. She had seen nothing. Just my inventory alone gave me 1,000 tricks, but on top of that, I had direct strength too thanks to my STR stat. I just have to raise it. And also level up. Kinvera, I said, putting a hand under her armpit and raising her. She blinked. I held her in the air with one hand, near the window, and basically the one in control of her life and death. I'm much stronger than you realize. Ah, she stammered, unsure what to say, and I put her down. My hand ran down her curves, and I smirked. But you're right, strength alone doesn't win a battle. I'll train for a few days. In the meantime, find the Second Son's location for me. I'm sure your ears and eyes can pick up on that quite fast, I ordered and watched her stare at me before she slowly nodded. As my king commands, she smiled, her momentary uneasiness and shock melting in thin air, as she leaned up to kiss me and then walked away with a sway of her hips. The next day, I heard the news. Eddard Stark had been executed. The entire Westeros was in uproar, and the effect even reached as far as Essos. It went to show how legendary that man was. Unfortunately, with this incident, the great tragedy of House Stark had begun. I had made a decision since that day in the bath. I was going to take the Iron Throne, something that was rightfully mine. It was not a dream I'd have dreamt if I didn't have a dragon flying around my head right now, especially if I didn't have the system. But now, the decision was made. I had met a pitiful end in my last life and was given a chance to live another. I was not going to settle for mediocrity when I had all the necessary cards to aim for the pinnacle. So I did. My goals had layers, but I didn't want to dream about the higher layers at the moment, as it would sound delusional. I'd keep my eye on the Iron Throne for now. I trained in spearmanship for the next 2 weeks. Kinvera found me a good spearmanship instructor who could show me the ropes. He was Bravo C and taught me the spear techniques of lightning dance. It was an SOC spear martial arts, primarily taught in Bravos. I assumed it was a family technique of the dance that Arya Stark learned, named water dance. It was a weird thing and extremely hard to pull off. But thankfully, I wasn't a total newbie in the way of the spear. As useless as the original Viserys was, he'd received spear training when he was a kid. That experience allowed me some edge on the lessons, and somehow I learned very fast. At least, the instructor said I did. I didn't think he was giving mindless praise. He didn't know my identity. I was wearing a black hair wig, and he had no reason to give false praise. Whoa, the instructor gasped when I parried another of his attacks, sending him staggering back a little. That was an impressive attack. You've come far, young man. We were in a small yard in the middle of the Red Temple, where we'd been training for the last few days. My teacher was no Barristan Selmy or any other legendary figure, but he taught the spear well enough. Spear was easier to learn than swords, and somehow I was learning it even faster. I think it was my int that helped me speed things up. I couldn't be sure, but the results spoke for themselves. I was no master spearman yet, but this should be enough to defend myself with the blade without just hacking down on people. Lightning dance was a bit showy, which is the reason behind the dance part, but I liked it. On top of that, as his praise left his lips, a system notification greeted me. Skill Spearmanship C has risen to Spearmanship B. When I first started taking these lessons, I finally gained a skill on my own after hours of meticulous training. That proved that skills could be earned if I spent enough time on them. Or maybe it was only limited to fighting techniques. I'd have to figure that out too. Thanks, I said, bowing in respect as I dropped my spear. It was broken in two. Footsteps came from the hallways then, and Kinvera entered the yard. She smiled. It seems we don't need your lessons any longer, instructor. She smiled at the instructor. Collect your payment from a servant. I have some private matters with Vis here. The Bravo C man bowed and then left. Kinvera walked over, her steps slow, as she stopped in front of me. You keep surprising me. He's one of the best around, and his students usually spend years taking lessons from him. I definitely haven't absorbed everything he can teach, but this should be enough, I said. I wasn't being humble, either. It'd have taken me a few months to absorb all the things he could teach. The man wasn't lacking materials to teach. Oh, she smiled. I saw your fight, it was impressive. But are you confident you'd be able to win against the Second Sons without the full package? I suppose you've found their location since you're talking like that, I asked, prompting her to just smile in response. Asterisk asterisk. The rhythmic thudding of hooves cut through the early dusk, the sounds dulled by the distant hum of the camp ahead. The Second Son's encampment sprawled before us in a patchwork of tents and makeshift pavilions, smoke curling lazily into the sky from scattered fires. It was a modest camp by the standards of Essos, housing only 500 men, but the air of defiance and discipline that was in this place was unmistakable. Well, in some parts anyway. Most of them look far too lax. Under their current leader, Marrow, the Second Sons had fallen off their glory. Perhaps since there was no great war to fight in, they were too unruly, although one part of the camp seemed to be training. Probably the Stromcrows, the team directly under Dario. I shifted slightly atop the horse, eyes narrowing as I took in the movement beyond the camp's perimeter. There were mercenaries lounging, sharpening blades, and some sparring shirtless in the warm evening. Those were strong warrior men. Despite being small in number, they're so notorious because of their discipline. Beside me, Kinvera said as her crimson robes caught the fading sunlight. Well, in the past, anyway. We weren't alone this time. The guards she had brought with her flanked us, their stony expressions hidden under helmets. Discipline in fighting perhaps, not in character. Some might argue that I was the last person to talk about character, but as expected, soon a teasing whistle came from a wiry man leaning against a tent pole. He grinned with eyes glittering as he took in Kinvera. Others followed, a low chorus of chuckles and smirks spreading through the crowd. They were as unruly as the stone men we'd fought, with zero respect for a priestess. Kinvera's lips curled into a subtle smirk, unfazed. She didn't seem bothered. She knew what she showed, and she did so knowing that. Slow down, I said to my Danny White, and it did. We were in front of the main entrance that loomed ahead, guarded by 4 men, their spears forming a cross that barred our path. One of them stepped forward, his face lined with scars and suspicion. No entry, he growled. The leaders are busy tending to an important guest. I blinked, barely concealing the flicker of curiosity. An important guest, here. Kinvera leaned forward, eyes sharp. The High Priestess of the Red Temple requests an audience. Inform your leaders if they would choose to turn me away. The guard's posture shifted, uncertainty creeping into his rigid stance. With a sharp nod, he turned and disappeared into the maze of tents, leaving us in a silence that buzzed with watchful eyes. The moments dragged, and I spent it looking around. When he returned, his breath came in short gasps, eyes darting between us and the path behind him. They will see you, he said, stepping aside with a reluctant motion. I exchanged a glance with Kinvera, who nodded. I urged my horse forward, and she followed, her expression veiled with an air of indifference, though I'd come to know her well enough to sense the anticipation crackling beneath it. She was curious about the show that'd soon unfold. Our protective guards led us, their presence a silent threat to anyone but us, but I couldn't bring myself to care. My mind was already sharpening, ready for battle. The main tent came into view, larger and open at the sides, lit by braziers that cast flickering shadows across its worn canvas. I frowned at the sight ahead. A table stood at its heart, laden with an indulgent spread of fruits in half-drained goblets. Around it sat 3 figures I recognized immediately: Marrow, the Titan's bastard, who filled the space with his barrel chest and bellowing laugh. He was the leader, while the other 2 were lieutenants. First was Prendal na Gezin, his face as stern, and then was Dario Naharis, the future queen fucker. None of them were unexpected. It was the 4th face that stopped me cold, and I felt a heat rise at the back of my neck. It was a man not of Essos but Westeros, with broad shoulders, a tall neck, and a smile so charismatic that women would pass out on his feet. He was laughing with the others. Prince Oberyn of Dorne, the Pedro Pascal lookalike, sat at ease, legs stretched and fingers wrapped around a goblet, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Beside him sat Ilaria Sand, her dark eyes dancing with amusement. They flicked at me, and her smile turned curious. I controlled my expression. What's going on? Oberyn, the Red Viper, a man who had fought with the Second Sons before during his younger days, yes, but why was he here now? Was this a coincidence, or had he come seeking me? That was impossible. Nobody should know I was in Volantis. Even if someone learned it, it wasn't enough for him to come see me. And there was no way he knew about the dragons. Logic said this was just a coincidence. Indeed. The Second Sons, when our horses stopped in front of the tent, Kinvera greeted the Second Sons with a smile. They stopped chatting among themselves, and all turned to us. Prince Oberyn did the same, and his eyes found mine across the tent. He frowned with a confused look on his face as if he almost recognized me. Almost. He didn't. I was glad. While I wasn't worried about him hurting me, if Prince Oberyn knew about me enough to come find me, what made it impossible for my enemies to do the same? I heaved out a breath of relief. 8. Who am I? I am the Conqueror. Chapter 8. Who am I? I am the Conqueror. The Second Sons, Kinvera greeted the Second Sons with a smile. Your reputation exceeds you. Of course, Marrow smirked, raising a cup at her. I didn't mean that as a compliment. Kinvera's smile widened. I was greeted with disrespectful whistles when I was entering the camp. Quite a treatment you show to a potential patron. The strict reputation of your discipline seems to be outdated. She finished, and Marrow's expression fell. He lowered his cup and scowled. I've also heard they are easy to betray their customers if their enemies propose a heavier pouch, I added, watching the man clench his jaws. Is this true, Marrow? Prince Oberyn, lying on his slide on the tall touch, frowned as he looked at Marrow. If so, I'll be disappointed. I made you the vice leader before I left and was incredibly delighted when I heard you became the leader a few years ago. And you're doing these things. He's lying, Prince. Despite his words, see, they've come to us for a job, Prendal na Gezin chimed in, coming to his leader's rescue, which made me laugh. Touché, Huh, I was surprised this illiterate fool knew what touché meant. Must be local to where he was from. I shook my head. No, that's not why I laughed. I laughed because we're not here to hire you as a customer. Kinvera smiled beside me while Dario Naharis blinked. He'd been eyeing Kinvera all this time, but my words caught his attention. He asked, why then? I took in their expressions. Marrow sipped wine, glaring at me. Prendal did the same. I eyed Prince Oberyn and then spoke. I'm here to challenge your leader, Marrow, in a duel, I said, hopping off my horse. I fear he doesn't deserve to lead you anymore. A dozen Second Sons took a step forward, weapons raised, but Prince Oberyn raised a hand. They halted on their spot while the prince beamed at me. Marrow was laughing, as was Prendal. Dario just smiled, just like the prince. You are an interesting man, Oberyn said, leaning to the side to kiss his paramour. Barging into the Second Sons' camp and challenging its leader. What is your name, warrior? For such a brave man, I think I'll recognize you. You can call me Vis for now, I said, eyeing Marrow, who stopped laughing to pour a glass of ale down his throat. I'll reveal my identity properly after defeating that drunken fool. Prendal growled, You don't get the balls to reveal your name and yet insult our leader. You're not even showing respect to Prince Abarin here, he said, trying to shift the animosity toward Abarin. Did he hope I would get humbled by the man? Annoying bastard. I'll kill him too. True. You should bow, Elaria Sand said in place of her lover. You stand before a prince, you realize. I do, and no, I won't bow. I looked at her. I recall bowing is only needed when the person in front of me is higher ranked than mine, I said, and Prince Abarin frowned in response. He didn't seem to take it to heart, however, but rather seemed more curious about me. Just as I had hoped. What do you say, Marrow? Prince Abarin looked at Marrow. You have a challenger. As per the second son's rules, you have to take up his challenge. Marrow licked his lips and smiled. Prince Abarin, as true as that rule is, I'm the leader now. So I decide the rules, he said, and Abarin frowned. He didn't like that. From the way his eyes darkened, I guessed that Marrow would have been in for a good beating if I wasn't here. His next words thankfully saved him. But fine, Marrow said, standing up. He's got an annoying face, I'd love to cut that in two. And then take that woman, he smirked at Kinvera, who smiled back. You smirking bitch, take your clothes off and come sit on my lap, and I may let you live. Kinvera giggled, finding it far too amusing, which the fool somehow took for flirting as he smiled. He then turned to me, as for your desire to take over the second sons, you fool. It's never going to happen, even if you somehow trick me into losing. The second sons don't have such a stupid rule that we'd go under anyone who defeats our leader. No, we have the rule of killing any bastard that hurts our leader. So good luck on leaving this camp alive, even if you win, by the luck of some god. He burst out laughing and grabbed his weapon midair, which a minion had thrown. It was a massive, curved sword, which seemed to be modeled after the scimitars and other curved swords typical in Essos. Marrow walked over and stood before me, smirking, scimitar glinting in his hand as if it had already tasted blood. Kinvera and our guards had dismounted by then and were moving away to clear space for our fight. The man eyed Kinvera again and then laughed at my face. His confidence was as thick as the stench of ale around him, eyes narrowed, daring me to make the first move. Spear, I clapped my hands, keeping my palms closed as I slowly withdrew them. A spear formed between them as if I was doing a magic trick. Marrow was blinking rapidly at the sight, probably wondering if he was seeing things. I gripped my spear and eyed him with a provocative smirk. He scoffed, tricks. He said so but still didn't attack first. I tightened my grip on the spear, feeling its weight become an extension of me, every breath slipping me deeper into the familiar rhythm of the lightning dance. I'd practiced it for a long time, and thanks to the system, each of its moves had become second nature, a current running through my veins. I could trust it. Marrow sneered, shifting his stance. Let's see what you got, coward, he taunted, lifting the scimitar high as if his raw strength alone would crush me. I didn't answer. Let him swing. Let him think he had the advantage. He charged, boots slamming against the ground, sword raised in a wild arc. I could see every movement, slow as if he moved through water. A slight twist of my body and his blade whooshed past, close enough to feel the breeze but never close enough to land. Marrow staggered, furious, catching himself just in time to shoot me a look of pure hatred. You slippery snake, he spat, roaring as he lunged again, even faster this time. But that was the beauty of the lightning dance. My spear moved with me, a natural rhythm flowing through the air in perfect, quiet arcs. I didn't just dodge his attacks. No, I drifted, letting each movement fall into the next. Marrow's blade cut into nothing, slicing the air, and I felt him grow more annoyed with each miss. That was making him more reckless, as I messed with him with taunting steps right out of his reach. His face twisted, frustration burning behind his gaze, and I could practically feel the rage boiling off him. Each failed strike made him angrier, his slashes more frantic, but I stayed just a breath away. Techniques or whatever, my stats were likely to double his. It gave me an unmistakable edge that he couldn't overcome with his experience. A whistle came flying. A drink to your great spearmanship, Prince Abarin said, raising a cup, drinking in my stead. I just laughed, which annoyed Marrow more. I remained in control, calm, every dodge a piece of the dance, and he was the fool stomping on his own feet, getting tangled in his fury. The crowd was silent, watching and waiting for the results. I could feel their eyes on me, feel the tension thick in the air. Marrow lunged again, his movements sloppy, and I knew this was it, the perfect moment. I let my body fall into the final rhythm, feet shifting, spear slicing through the air with deadly precision. One swift, sharp thrust, and my spear found its mark, sliding right between Mero's ribs. Blood splashed. His eyes went wide, the sneer frozen on his face, replaced by a look of stunned horror. His grip on the scimitar loosened, fingers twitching as he tried to hold on to the last shreds of his strength. For just a second, he slumped against the spear, weight heavy, and I held it firm, watching him. He was already gone, the life draining from him in a silent gasp. "You've killed a human. You've received experience points." I pulled the spear free, stepping back as he collapsed at my feet. Silence blanketed the camp briefly, every mercenary's gaze flicking between Mero's body and me, something like awe dawning in their eyes. The dance was over, and I was the one left standing. Everyone, not for long, unfortunately. "Kill that bastard," Prendal shouted, and the stunned second sons roared in response. A wave of sharks seemed to close upon me, but I didn't react. "Someone else did. Nobody will attack him," Dario Naharis said, raising a sword. "Anyone who goes against that order, I'll kill them myself." Stormcrows, a squad, loyal to Dario rather than the second son's name, turned to their brothers, weapons held high. "Dario, what is the meaning of this?" Prendal unsheathed his weapon and growled, and in response, Dario shrugged. "You can kill him, but let's wait a minute, can't we?" He looked at me. "He's yet to reveal his identity. Such a fine fighter should at least get to introduce himself before death." "I agree," Prince Abaron nodded. "Speak, warrior, what is your full name?" His man's gaze turned sharp as he looked at me. He must have gotten really curious when I said we were equal earlier. The silence around us was thick and charged, every eye fixed on me like they were staring down the edge of a blade. I didn't need to say a word, just let the tension build, heavy as the air before a storm. Slowly, I lifted a hand, reaching up to my hair, fingers slipping between the strands. Then, in one clean motion, I pulled. The black wig peeled away, tossed to the ground with a casual flick. The silver hair of House Targaryen fell around my shoulders, glinting under the flickering light. I ran a hand through it, letting it settle, my gaze daring them to question it. From across the tent, Prince Abaron stirred, sitting up on his couch. He had a stunned look, one that spoke of ghosts and memories unburied. His mouth parted, a whisper slipping out before he even seemed to realize it. "Rhaegar. I did look similar to my late brother, yes. I kept the same hairstyle as him, and now that my cut-off hair had regrown, it looked just like his. But no, I wasn't him. I had my own name." I met his gaze, the weight of everything I was, of who I was, settling in my voice. "I am Viserys Targaryen, Prince of the Seven Kingdoms, blood of the Conqueror, and the last living dragon." That was all it took. The tension cracked like a whip through the air, and I watched as the truth settled over them, hard as iron and just as unforgiving. Their eyes tracked me like they were seeing something ancient, a memory of fear they'd thought buried. Good, let them see it, let them feel it, the lethality of my lineage. I took a step forward, my voice low but loud. "The second sons are full of nobles, yet lately they've learned to play at loyalty when the right purse calls. Is it because you've lost your nobility? I'm here to take you all, exiled sons of noble houses, cast-offs, forgotten, and give you the power that was stolen from you." They watched, their expressions shifting, breaking. I saw men who had long given up, faces once proud but hardened by years of war and service to the highest bidder. They didn't need a speech about who they were. They needed a chance to become something else. "Enough," I continued, voice gaining an edge. "Why settle for scraps when we can take the whole feast? Robert Baratheon is dead. King Joffrey is a bastard. At times like this, my rightful claim to the throne is burning hotter than ever. Men, stand with me, and I'll make you legends. You'll be known not as exiles or second sons but as conquerors, feared across both Westeros and Essos. And beyond." I turned to look at Prendal and Dario. "Come, and your names shall be etched into history, not as pawns but as men who rose with fire and blood." The silence thickened, every word twisting deeper into them. The only sound was the slow, uncertain shuffling as some glanced at one another, the crack in their disbelief widening. Battle-hardened men, in the face of strong royal blood, hesitated to kneel. A voice broke the quiet from somewhere in the crowd, rough and skeptical. "You'll conquer the Iron Throne." The man's face twisted with disbelief, and he scoffed. "You and what army? Even if we follow, we're just 1,000 men. That seemed to strike doubt in the people who had started believing. Prince Oberon was frowning, staring at me as if wondering what I'd respond with. I felt the smirk stretch over my lips as I raised my hand, holding his gaze. What army? In one smooth motion, I clenched my fingers, tearing through the air. The crack was sharp and jagged, a rip in reality. The air around us quivered, and then it broke wide as Viserion burst forth, a force of heat and fury in golden scales. Her wings spread wide, her roar cutting through the night, a flash of fire painting the sky red. Gasps, shouts, some staggered back, some fell to their knees, eyes wide and faces pale as they watched her rise, her scales glinting like molten gold. A dragon, they were staring at Myth. Viserion circled overhead, her wings cutting through the air with power that made the ground shudder. Every beat of her wings commanded awe and terror. Prince Oberon had shot up on his feet, his shock raw, eyes locked on the sky, lips parted as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. He looked at me, face pale with shock, and then his lips widened ever so slowly. A grin broke over his face, wild and unrestrained, a glint of madness in his eye. I didn't lower my hand as I spoke, my voice loud, steady. Allow me to apologize. I lied when I said I was the last living dragon, I said, a smirk slipping into my voice. I looked at Prendal, who'd annoyed me quite a bit earlier. I turned to Viserion, smiling. Dracarys, I commanded, and she breathed fire at Prendal. Too shocked to dodge, the man burnt off to crisps as he screamed. Dario had run off to the side, watching the scene with wide eyes. Everyone was watching the scene with similar gazes. Your dragon, Viserion, has killed a human. You've received experience points. With what army? You asked. I faced the man who'd questioned me earlier. He fell back, unable to bear my gaze, and swallowed. With my dragon, who will tower over the largest of castles in a year. With her, I have armies of hundreds of thousands in no time. But I need loyal men to make the first strike, and I want you to feel lucky that I've chosen you lots over any other option. The crowd stayed silent, awe and disbelief mixing in the air as Viserion roared, flame licking the night. Prince Oberon's wide grin grew wilder, something raw and reckless in his expression. Kinvera stepped beside me, silent but her presence bright. Her hand slipped through my arm as she looked out at the crowd. The second sons stared at us, their faces shifting between fear, wonder, and something else, something fierce, something loyal. In their eyes, I could see it. The spark of fire that had been waiting for someone to stoke it back to life. I had succeeded in my mission. Author note: last chapter of the week, next one comes out on Sunday. 42 comments 0 vote. 9. Strategy of Dragons. Chapter 9. Strategy of Dragons. The firelight danced over the faces gathered around, throwing shadows across their eyes as if to mask the calculations spinning behind them. The tent was open to the night air, its flaps rustling faintly, while the crackling torches cast a warm, flickering glow on the faces of those in attendance. Somewhere in the distance, the low hum of camp life played out, though here in this space, we might as well have been a world apart. I greet the High Priestess of the Red Temple of Volantis. Prince Oberon's voice rang with surprising formality, the flame of truth, the light of wisdom, and first servant of the Lord of Light. He lowered his head slightly, a respectful nod that bordered on a bow. I thought it was you, but I wasn't sure. Allow me to apologize for those lousy bastards' manners from earlier. Whoa, that's a lot of titles. I didn't know she was the first servant of R'hllor. Just how old was she? Kinvera's lips curled in amusement as she raised a slender hand as if to wave away the matter. Oh, please, Prince, she replied lightly, her voice lilting. They've already returned to the Lord. A subtle gleam in her eye suggested she took more satisfaction in that fact than she let on. I watched the exchange with muted interest. Here we were, an open tent, the torches holding back the night, the distant murmur of the camp all but drowned out by the significance of conversation in this space. I could feel it settling around me like a cloak. These men, these warriors, half of them already belonged to me in name and loyalty, but I knew they needed something more, something that tied their purpose to a future worth believing in. They needed their king to show them results for all their hearts to move. This is a very pleasant meeting, Prince Oberon, I said, shifting my gaze to meet his. The last of the Targaryens haven't forgotten the friendship of the Dornishmen. As such, I was thinking of visiting Dorne soon. Who knew I'd meet the Red Viper of Dorne here? Oberon's smile grew, its warmth almost alarming. Of course, you have no idea how glad I am to hear that. My niece, your fiancée, she misses you dearly. That was polite fiction at best. I knew about her character, and although not in depth, it was enough for me to know that was a lie. If Ariane Martel missed me at all, it was likely because of what my name represented, not because of who I was. She could have been the Queen of Westeros if that engagement had remained, after all. Still, the words were meant kindly enough, and they fit his role well. I allowed a small smile to play on my lips. As far as I'm aware, that engagement has been broken by the Martells, I said with a softer smile, and he shook his head. Only in front. You have to understand that we had no choice but to play by the new king's rules. Now that Robert is dead and you have risen with your head held high, I'm certain my brother will be happy to reignite the marriage, he smirked. Or you can have one of my daughters. They're a little venomous, but I'm sure a dragon will manage. I laughed, and he laughed along, raising a glass of wine at me. I held back my thoughts from forming on my lips, returned the gesture, and sipped my own drink. Kinvera shifted beside me, her attention turning to Oberyn. It eases my worries to see you guys get along. As you might have guessed, Prince Oberyn, I have chosen to support Viserys, the rightful king, in his cause, she said, her voice carrying a calming conviction. The Lord of Light shines brightly upon his path, and so I shall help him reclaim the Iron Throne. Delight flickered across Oberyn's face. The High Priestess of the Red Temple backing a Targaryen, he murmured, his eyes dancing. It sounds like the gods might be real after all. He burst out laughing and looked at me again, an unspoken question lingering behind his gaze. After a while, the conversation drifted to small talk and questions about trivial matters. But the air between us was coiled, stretched thin as we waited to address what really mattered. Finally, it was Ellaria, seated beside Oberyn with her dark, perceptive eyes, who leaned forward, her voice low. My prince likes you, that is good. But, tell me, Targaryen, what exactly are your next plans? She glanced around at the encampment. Westeros is fractured. The 5 kings each scrape against one another, drawing more blood than sense. Your new soldiers are an impressive bunch, I'll admit, since my prince was a part of Second Sons before, but they're just 1,000 men. It's spare change against 5 kingdoms. Dorne will support you, Oberyn added, but she has a point. I believe we'll need a larger army to make that throne yours. I met his gaze, letting a slight smile play on my lips as I took a sip of wine, the rich taste curling over my tongue. An army isn't an issue, Prince, I said with quiet confidence. Elsewhere, someone else is building an army for me. I'll just need to wait. In the meantime, I just have to get involved in Westeros politics and this ridiculous war. Ellaria tilted her head, brow lifting in a half-skeptical, half-amused look. Involved in politics, she echoed in a voice full of doubt. Without an army, that sounds like the sort of plan that gets men like you killed. I couldn't help but laugh softly. You're right, Lady Ellaria. But I'm not going to fight armies by myself. Not yet, at least. I let the last word settle, a touch of gravity pulling them down. I'm going to let the kings destroy each other while I stay in the shadows, nudging them along. When they've drained themselves dry, I'll arrive, not as the beggar prince but as a king with an army at my back. That was precisely the plan. Joffrey Baratheon, Stannis Baratheon, Renly Baratheon, Balon Greyjoy, and Robb Stark. These so-called 5 kings grew ahead after the passage of Robert Baratheon. Thanks to my knowledge from the TV show, I knew more than enough points to remove or move around, which could change the entire field we were playing at. Prince Oberyn leaned back, his brow creasing. Moving between camps, sowing discord, it sounds clever in theory. But you're no shadow assassin. You're a Targaryen. Your main source of power is your dragon. You can't stay hidden. I nodded, appreciating the doubt. It gave me the chance to make my point all the clearer. Without a word, I drew a dagger from thin air, letting it appear between my fingers as if plucked from the night itself, and tossed it toward him. Oberyn caught it, surprise flickering across his face. I pointed at my chest. Throw it at my heart, I said simply. Trust me. The tent held its breath. Oberyn hesitated, then lifted his arm. I'm a better marksman, Ellaria interjected smoothly, taking the dagger from him. Her eyes gleamed with reckless mischief as she looked at me. A heartbeat later, her arm whipped forward, the blade hurtling toward my chest. The dagger struck, but instead of piercing flesh, it dropped to the ground with a dull thud as if it had hit an invisible wall. Silence rippled across the tent, broken only by the soft clink of metal against the earth. Elaria raised a brow. You're wearing armor, aren't you? Her lips curved in amusement. That's cheating. I held her gaze, then lifted my shirt, revealing bare skin beneath. No armor, nothing but the slight rise and fall of my breathing. Elaria frowned, her eyes narrowing in curiosity, and then picked up a knife from the fruit bowl beside her. She tossed it again, and this time, it brushed my skin before falling once more, impotent. Believe me when I say, I continued, letting my shirt drop back into place, that I'm not invincible. But my defenses are greater than most. It is touching seeing you worry for me, but I have special powers, Prince. Although I was sure an arrow could still pierce me from a close enough distance, I didn't need to explain that. And my methods will allow me to slip between the cracks unnoticed, stir the fire, and disappear before anyone suspects. Oberon and Elaria exchanged glances and then gave me slow, cautious nods. Elaria Sand appeared quite humbled and was now eyeing me with a slutty look. I ignored it. Oberon's lips quirked with a faint smile. I find myself intrigued. Visories. You can bring things in and out of thin air, and you have skin thicker than armor. It all makes me very curious, but more than that, it makes me feel safe. I can rest assured without worrying. All right then, I'll take the bait. I agree with your plan. I'll arrange for all of us to travel to Dornay, including the 1,000-second suns. There, they can rest, waiting for the call, while you stir the pot in the War of Five Kings. Thank you, Prince Oberon, I said genuinely. I trusted the man. If someone questioned his loyalty to the Targaryens, they'd fail to disprove his hate for the Lannisters. That made him an easy friend. But I have a question, he said, his gaze sharpening as he sipped rich wine. Earlier, you mentioned someone else is building an army for you. What did you mean by that? I held his gaze, then let my eyes drift upward, gesturing for him to follow my line of sight. The night sky stretched out above us, studded with stars. Look. Beyond the dissipating red comet, two more fiery trails blazed through the darkness, brighter and newer. My sister, I said softly, my voice edged with a touch of reverence, doesn't share the abilities I do. So I left 2 dragon eggs with her, precious gifts, waiting for the right moment. Those lines in the sky, I watched the understanding dawn on his face, the widening of his eyes, are proof. She has awakened them. A stunned silence filled the tent, thick and heavy. Three dragons, Oberon whispered, more to himself than anyone. Prince Oberon, his whore, and Kinvera all understood the implications of my words. No matter what the rumor about me and my sister's animosity was, they'd believe my words more than those rumors. To them, she and I were working together. I'll let the plot in Essos move as the original. My dearest Dany would carve her way through Essos, building a force while I bring Westeros to its knees. And when the right time came, I'd reunite with my dear sister and make her submit. Together, we'd claim what was ours. Far above, the stars shifted, and the comet's tail stretched wider across the sky, a silent reminder that for all my plans, the fire I intended to unleash was a force beyond any of them. Author note: unlike last week, we have a much larger collection now. So a goal of 100 stones in an hour should be easy. Let's do it then. Start voting. Goal: if we cross 100 stones in the upcoming 60 minutes of posting this, I'll post the next chapter immediately. So, Chapter 10. Of course, tomorrow will also be a chapter. Additional goal: super hard, but it's supposed to be so. If we cross 400 stones in the upcoming 60 minutes of posting this, I'll post the next 2 chapters immediately. So, Chapter 10 and Chapter 11. 32 comments 0 vote. 10. Dornay, Sunspear. Chapter 10. Dornay, Sunspear. Note: great, we've completed the goal in 42 minutes, so here's the promised Chapter 10. This is the second chapter of the day. Let's continue on the additional goal still. I think we can make it at this rate. If we cross 400 stones by the second hour, about 75 minutes from right now, I'll post Chapter 11 immediately. Let's go. The morning mist clung to the ship as it cut through the water, the distant silhouette of Volantis fading into a faint smudge on the horizon. I leaned on the deck's railing, the cool ocean breeze slipping through my hair, carrying the last traces of Volantis with it. It had a strange way of pulling my mind back, if only for a moment, making me think about the power I'd gathered there and the alliances I'd secured. I watched the city shrink, its temples and towers dissolving into the haze. No part of me felt nostalgic. I'd done what I needed to, and that place was behind me now. Viserion flew around me, soaring the sea, catching a fish with her claws. She was growing. She grew faster when I let her out. Tyrion Lannister's theory about the caged dragons might be true, after all. Footsteps clicked against the deck, breaking my thoughts. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Kinvera's presence was almost a tangible heat radiating before she even reached my side. Missing Volantis already, she teased, her voice as light as the breeze. A laugh escaped me. Shouldn't I be asking you that? It's the home to your church, after all, I said, glancing down at her. I wasn't exactly expecting you to tag along. Oh my king, why will I not tag along? Any other priestess can do the church's work. But this matter can only come to fruit through me. She leaned against me, her hand trailing up to rest on my shoulder, fingers pressing just enough to remind me she wasn't fragile. I'm hurt. Are you already pushing me away? Her eyes glinted with mischief. Or are you just so eager to meet your little fiancé? Hey, I'm glad you're coming along, I replied, my gaze drifting back to the open water. I'm going to need your powers, Kinvera. And as for my fiancé, well, we'll see. Oh please, she said, giggling as she pushed herself against my body. Princess Arianne Martell wasn't a character I was familiar with. She was a character that only existed in the A Song of Ice and Fire books, not in the Game of Thrones TV show. But my nerd of a friend back in my old life had once mentioned her in passing, describing Arianne Martell with no small amount of enthusiasm. Apparently, she was an eager girl, someone who found her way around men even before she'd come of age. Well, what did I expect from a Dornish woman? Absolute whores. My mind drifted briefly. I wasn't walking into Dorne expecting a delicate flower. Still, the engagement, whether it could be rekindled. I didn't think so. I didn't want to, anyway. Her reputation aside, she had a personality problem. She was a brat. The name, Viserys Targaryen, will soon be far larger than Dorne. So why must I tie myself down to a Dornish princess then? The marriage of the Viserys Targaryen can be used as a negotiating tool in the future. So, I was leaning towards not letting the engagement relight. But we'll see. Kinvera shifted, her body pressing closer, eyes holding that teasing gleam. Aren't you worried? I said, smirking. The men are staring. What will they think, seeing a priestess behaving like this? Let them think whatever they want. Unless their stares scare you. Her voice was low, and her hand trailed down my chest as though daring me to make a move. A scoff left my lips as I lifted my hand, letting it fall with a swift spank across her curvy ass. She gasped, arching toward me, her smirk deepening as my hand lingered, squeezing her firmly. Let's take this to my chambers, I murmured, grabbing her hand and leading her below deck. She laughed softly, her fingers lacing with mine as I pulled her through the narrow corridor, pushing open the door to the dim room. I let her go, watching as she staggered a step, her lips curved in a challenging smirk. Without a word, I shoved her back onto the bed, her robes falling in disarray around her as she hit the mattress. Ah, she gasped, looking shocked, and then giggled. Oh, the dragon's aggressive today, she said, and my eyes traced her form. The cloth slipped from her shoulder, bearing just enough to stir that heat. She looked up, the shadows of the room casting her eyes in a dark gleam, her smile daring me. I didn't need a second invitation as I yanked her clothes apart and started ravaging her into a moaning mess. The desert seemed endless, a vast sea of dunes that had carried us for days. The sun was a half-buried coin on the horizon, painting the sands in shades of gold and red. Ahead, Sunspear finally took shape, its towers breaking the sky like the jagged teeth of some ancient beast. From this distance, it felt unreal, half mirage, half truth. I kept my face wrapped, a piece of cloth hiding everything but my eyes, while the wig scratched against my scalp. Beside me, Kinvera rode in silence, her form cloaked from head to toe, her presence subdued. Neither she nor I wanted to catch attention. We were shadows in the desert, trailing behind Prince Aberon and Ilaria Sand, while the second sons followed in disciplined silence. Aberon cast a glance back, catching my gaze with a smirk. Quite the sight, isn't it? His voice was tinged with pride. I could understand why. That is Sunspear, my home. She's protected on 3 sides by the sea and on the 4th by the Shadow City. To those who don't belong, she's a labyrinth, a trap. But to the Dornishmen, she's as open as the sky. I watched the city grow closer, the walls high as if to touch the sky. A meticulous work of art, I replied, and it was a genuine compliment. It was an Arabian masterpiece of a city from the Middle Ages. Your home's a painting, Prince. A baron's smirk deepened at my words. Compliments did charming work on anyone. That's one way of putting it. But as beautiful as Dornay is, the Dornishmen are strong. We're survivors, and our enemies always make the mistake of forgetting that. He liked to talk about his people, and I was glad to humor him since those same men were going to fight for me soon. We traveled the rest of the path in small talk. As we approached the outer city, Sunspear's shadow unfolded around us. Narrow streets wound like veins, packed with people who stopped to watch us pass. They whispered to each other, some even calling out a baron's name. They adored the man. Eyes lingered on our procession, a curious gaze that only grew sharper as they noticed the armed men marching in our wake. But there was no fear, not with a baron at the head. The Dornish held him in their gaze as one would watch the desert sun, daring it to burn them but never turning away. If not for his adventurous nature, Prince Oberyn would have ruled Dornay far better than his brother. We reached the gates soon after that as Oberyn spoke. That imposing structure is the threefold gate, he said, nudging his chin toward the structure that had doors stacked like shields guarding the heart of Sunspear. The old palace looms beyond. Can you see? I can, I nodded. The royal castle's spires reached up like defiant fists, crowned by the Spear Tower and the great domed Tower of the Sun. The weight of Dornay's legacy pressed down on us as we rode forward. Image here, a guard stepped out from the gate, bowing low as he addressed Oberyn. Welcome back, Prince Oberyn, he greeted, the respect in his voice clear, though his eyes flicked briefly over the rest of us, lingering on the second sons. Shall I arrange quarters for your company? Oberyn chuckled, dismissing the formality with a wave. Yes, make sure they're shown to proper quarters. They're the men of this important friend I've brought alone, and I don't want my men getting lost in the alleys. Wouldn't want them spooking the locals, now would we? Dario Naharis took that as his cue, guiding his horse to my side with a chuckle. His gaze, as usual, bordered on insolence. My lord, he murmured, bowing his head with that exaggerated flourish of his. You know where to find me should you need me. I gave him a brief nod, and he pulled back, blending into the parade as the guards guided the second sons to the place they'd be staying. In the meantime, some other guards moved to escort us toward the old palace. Beautiful place, Kinvara brought her horse closer and said. First time coming here? I asked. She shook her head. No, I've visited Dornay before, a long time ago. She said and smiled at me, making me raise an eyebrow. We stayed close, silent, as we entered the palace grounds, leaving the sounds of the city behind. Within the walls, Sunspear's age and legacy seemed to seep from every stone, like a silent declaration that it would endure long after we were gone. Welcome, Oberyn turned to me and said. To the old castle. The air was thick with the scent of incense, mingling with the faint trace of flowers from hidden gardens. The hall swallowed sound, our steps muffled as if the palace itself held its breath. And then we reached the chamber, where Doran Martell sat waiting, a man carved by the years, his body confined to a wheelchair, yet his gaze as sharp and watchful as a hawk. Beside him stood a giant of a man, dark-skinned. Areo Hoden noticed my gaze and stared back. He was as tall as the hound but larger. Quite imposing to look at. Oberyn dismounted with fluid grace, spreading his arms wide, his grin full of boyish mischief that belied his age. Brother, he called, his voice warm. Oberyn, you're back from your vacation. Doran Martell smiled at his younger brother, his gaze flickering to Elaria who nodded in respect. I thought you'd remain there for a bit longer. I was planning to, but after hearing the situation in Westeros, the one too many people calling themselves kings, I couldn't remain still, Oberyn said and then grinned. Brother, I bring you a gift. One so precious I didn't dare trust the news to a raven. Doran's gaze moved from Oberyn to us, his expression unreadable. His eyes lingered on Kinvara, and I saw the flicker of unease in his face. She slowly took off the robe that hid her face, and Doran's eyes widened. He tried to hide his reaction but didn't quite succeed. A red priestess, he murmured, his tone carefully neutral, though the distaste wasn't lost on me. The Dornishmen worshipped the seven gods, after all. Kinvara only smiled, inclining her head with a serenity that bordered on mockery. The Lord of Light's blessings upon you, Prince Doran, she said softly, her voice smooth as silk but carrying an edge that made Doran's fingers twitch on the armrest of his chair. I smirked at that exchange. I was starting to like her antics. Much of her priest talk was just jabbing at people, it was funny. Thankfully, my face was hidden, so the smirk went unnoticed. Doran inclined his head in acknowledgement, his eyes wary. But then his gaze turned to me, curiosity mingling with suspicion as he looked into my eyes. "I assume it's him who's the gift," he said, dismissing the idea that Kinvera could be the said gift. "Yes, it is him," a baron said, turning to me. I slowly took off the cloth that wrapped my face. I let it fall, watching Doran stare at me carefully. He didn't recognize me yet. Then I reached for the edge of the wig. With a single motion, I pulled it free, letting my silver hair fall loose, the stark color catching the torchlight. Gasps rippled through the guards, a whisper of recognition passing through the air. Prince Doran's eyes trembled. I took a step forward, meeting Doran's gaze directly, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Prince Doran," I greeted, bowing my head slightly. "He's Viserys Targaryen, the blood of the conqueror." Kinvera stepped forward to introduce me. I liked that. The words lost their weight if I was the one to introduce myself all the time. He's come here not as a stranger but as an old friend. The silence that followed was absolute, the weight of my words settling like stone. Doran's expression tightened, his gaze cutting through me like a blade. His eyes held mine, and for a moment, I could see the conflict there, the way his mind turned over the implications. And then, with a small, resigned nod, he accepted the truth of what stood before him. Something big was going to hit Westeros, even the cripple prince could tell. 11. Princess Arianne Martell. Chapter 11. Princess Arianne Martell. The late afternoon sun filtered through the lattice windows of the old palace, casting a warm, golden hue over the chamber. Fruits sat heaped in bowls, figs, pomegranates, and grapes glistening like jewels, while a baron leaned back in his chair, stretching his long legs in a posture as relaxed as his gaze. He plucked a grape and popped it into his mouth, his eyes twinkling with barely concealed mischief as he watched his brother. Across from him, Doran sat upright, fingers folded, his gaze distant and wary. "So, brother," a baron started, his tone almost playful, "what do you think of my gift?" Doran sighed, rubbing a hand over his temple. "Perhaps it's wiser to take a bath before we discuss this. You've been riding through the sands, and surely even you need rest." A baron laughed. "Rest? I've waited too long to bring this up. Besides, I've already sent word for Arianne. She'll be here any moment." He leaned back, his smile fading only slightly. "I can't contain myself. Dorne has slept long enough, perhaps it's time." Doran's expression tightened. He didn't seem to like the implications behind those words. "This will bring Dorne into open war, a baron," he said. "Are you prepared for that? Do you really want that? For innocent Dornishmen to die for a meaningless war?" A baron's gaze sharpened, and he leaned forward, his fingers pressing against the table. "Brother, it wouldn't be a meaningless war. Do you truly not want revenge? Against those sick Lannisters? A Lannister bastard sits on the throne right now, it's the best of any time to seek revenge. The man I brought to Sunspear doesn't only have dragon blood in name, he has a real dragon." Quote. Doran raised an eyebrow, an expression of pure skepticism coloring his features. "The last dragon that lived was the size of a kitten when it died. I don't distrust you if you say he has a dragon, but if he does, and I haven't seen him when he met it, it must have been hiding in his robes. The size of a kitten, this one too. Such a small creature is hardly the weapon we need." A baron. A baron fell silent, and Doran continued, his voice soft but firm, "I remember Rhaegar. I remember his cause and the ruin it brought." His jaw tightened, words carrying the weight of old grudges. "But Viserys, from all I've heard, he's no Rhaegar Targaryen. He's a broken man, a boy who sold his sister to savages and ran when he lost control. What kind of king abandons his blood for a crown? We at Dorne don't sell off little girls, do we, little brother?" Quote. A baron's face grew stony, a rare hardness settling in his eyes. "I thought the same, brother. But you're wrong. This Viserys is no coward, not anymore. Perhaps the rumors painted him weak deliberately, or perhaps he's just changed. But he's far from the man in those rumors. I've seen him fight, and I, a Baron Martell, was impressed with the way he held a spear." He held Doran's gaze unblinking. "He carries the fire of our old allies, their blood and their fire, and if you give him a chance, I'll have him show you." His dragon too. Doran shook his head, a faint smile barely tugging at the corner of his mouth as if humoring a baron despite his better judgment. He'd always done that. A baron knew his older brother adored him a lot. That was why he humored his potentially bad decisions many times. And if he allowed that this time too, Doran wouldn't regret it. For you, I'll entertain this, a baron. But his presence here must be kept a secret. I've no desire to invite trouble from King's Landing. He paused, his voice dropping to a murmur. If he's worth the trouble you believe him to be, we'll see it soon enough. A baron nodded. His brother was a cautious man, but contrary to what some people believed, he was not a spineless coward. A baron loved him for that. Just then, steady and fast footsteps echoed down the corridor. Both men looked to the door as Princess Ariane strode in, a gorgeous lady, her presence a burst of color and confidence that lit the chamber. She wore deep green silks failing to cover her white blouse, adorned with gold jewelry, her skin bronzed by the Dornish sun. Image here, the dark-haired girl's gaze was as sharp and knowing as her uncle's. "Uncle," she called out, breaking into a wide grin as she crossed the room. She threw her arms around a baron in a swift embrace, her laugh light and genuine. "Back from another adventure, I see." A baron chuckled, returning the embrace and giving her a fond pat on the shoulder. "More or less," he said, his voice softening. "And how is my brilliant niece?" Ariane pulled back, flashing a mischievous smile. "Bored, mostly. You know how it is here in Sunspear. Endless courtiers and games of Syvass, no adventures to speak of. When will you take me on an adventure again?" She threw a teasing glance at Doran. A baron laughed, but Doran's face grew somber as he watched them, his eyes shifting back to a baron with an unspoken question. Sensing the shift, Ariane glanced between them, her smile fading slightly. "All right, what is this about?" she asked, her gaze narrowing. "Why the sudden summons?" Doran remained silent, his fingers interlocked as he leaned forward, watching her with the careful, calculated look he reserved for moments of significance. But it was a baron who spoke. The man's voice turned serious, his gaze fixed on her face. "Ariane, my dearest niece," he began slowly, his words deliberate, "do you remember the engagement you had as a little girl? The one that was broken?" Ariane's brows drew together, confusion flashing across her face as she searched her memory. She looked at a baron and then back at her father. A glint of recognition passed by her gaze, and her expression hardened as understanding settled over her. Ariane's eyes trembled. Ariane Martell was mad. The free skies and scorching sands of Dorne, the warmth of Sunspear where she ruled as a free woman, these were her inheritance. And yet here she was, feeling those freedoms squeezed tight as her guardians toyed with the idea of her marriage to a Targaryen. Why the hell are they doing this? Her ex-fiancé was a man who might not even live long enough to wear a crown, a coward with a reputation as ragged as his family's ruins. The idea of being tied to a man she was sure would perish in this war of 5 kings was maddening. But her uncle, the ever-reckless Red Viper of Dorne, wanted her to consider it. He believed Viserys might be worth a second look. Perhaps he's not the same as the rumors. At least meet him for yourself and see, her uncle had said before she left the meeting chambers. But as much as Ariane loved her uncle, she knew better than to trust a baron's whims when it came to other people's lives. "But," she sighed, shaking her head, "it'd be a lie to say I don't feel a little greedy." Indeed, the whispers of ambition tugged at her thoughts. She could feel the allure of what such a marriage might bring. Queen, not just the princess ruler of Dorne that she was destined to become, but the queen of the 7 realms. It was intoxicating to imagine a throne beyond Sunspear, to feel the weight of the Iron Throne beneath her, her voice ruling over more than just the sands. The allure of power and the weight of her uncle's request, both had her trapped. That was why she hadn't screamed or lashed out yet. She would meet him first and see for herself. This supposed beggar king. And so, now, she followed Esser Andre Dalt down Old Palace's shadowed corridors, the setting sun casting a molten gold light through narrow windows. Her steps felt heavier, the moment drawing close as she prepared herself. At least I hope he's not ugly, even if he's a coward. Soon, they stopped in front of a door, and Esser Andre knocked, his gaze averted in the respectful way he knew she preferred. A voice called from inside, low and unhurried, "Come in." She sighed, then pushed the door open, eyes scanning the dim room. She blinked, and then her breath hitched as she caught sight of the shirtless figure by the window. The silver-haired man's back was broad and muscled, slightly wet from the bath he must have taken, catching the waning light lit by the setting sun. He didn't turn right away, he lingered there, facing the sun, his profile cast in shadow. When he finally turned, her gaze traced the lines of his chiseled jaw, strong and angled, sharp against the soft light. The fury that had simmered in her chest shifted and softened. Just a little. Princess Ariane allowed a small smile. Sir Andre, she murmured, a dismissive nod toward the night, you can leave. Her eyes remained locked on Viserys as she stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. In a matter of seconds, her anger was replaced with a glimmer of curiosity. Author note: hope you liked the chapter, and thank you for the votes. We're top 3 now, let's gun for top 1, keep voting. 39 comments 0 vote. 12. The Clash of Ideals. Chapter 12. The Clash of Ideals. Dorne was a beautiful place. Unlike Volantis, which stank of overpopulation, iron shackles, and men's greed, Dorne was alive, a free, raw beauty that didn't hide its edges. The sunset poured its last light through my window, dyeing the sky with an amber glow. But that hardly mattered to me now. The true view stood before me. Princess Ariane Martell. Princess Ariane, I greeted, a slight smile playing at my lips as she approached with that dangerous grace Dornishwomen had perfected. I took her hand, bowing my head to brush my lips across her knuckles. Prince Viserys. Her voice was rich, layered with interest and amusement as she withdrew her hand, silver eyes meeting mine. Her smile lingered, and I could see why men lost themselves over her. She was beautiful and hot-tempered, both a pleasure and a danger. Then we exchanged pleasantries. It was a formality that neither of us truly believed in but performed out of habit. She asked how I liked Dorne, her eyes flicking over me as though searching for whatever truth lay beneath my words. I took a slow breath, giving her a smile as I began. Dorne, I said, glancing toward the open window where the last hints of sunset streaked the sky with hues of orange and gold, is a place of undeniable beauty that is impossible to capture in words. It has an edge to it, a rawness that feels untamed yet elegant. I held her gaze. The sands are relentless, sculpting this land in ways that make it unforgiving for outsiders, but there's beauty in that. The dunes, the oasis towns, the freedom in the air, every corner seems to hide something wild and enchanting. Ariane raised an eyebrow, the faintest of smiles playing on her lips as if she was both amused and intrigued. A poetic observation, Prince Viserys. I wasn't expecting that, she said, her voice carrying a hint of tease. But Dorne isn't merely the land. There's more to it than the dunes and sunsets. I leaned in slightly, letting my gaze linger on her with unmistakable intent. I know, I replied, my voice low. In fact, the most beautiful part of Dorne is not the land or its landscapes. My gaze dropped, trailing over her as if tracing the curves of the dunes themselves, and then rose to meet her eyes. It's a beauty that walks among the sands, sharp as the sun yet soft as the evening breeze. The kind that could make a man forget himself if he's not careful. Did anyone tell you how beautiful your eyes are? She laughed softly, though her gaze held a glimmer of interest, her pride clearly piqued. Such sweet words, Prince, she murmured. I must admit, you're different from what I've heard. I smiled, catching the faint trace of surprise in her expression. I felt bad for the words I'd tell her soon. Is it such a surprise, Princess? Her lips curved, her expression turning both coy and daring. Dorne is beautiful, but, she let her words hang, her gaze drifting downward to my bare chest before she met my eyes again, amusement flashing in her gaze. I suppose it's a bit warmer here than in other places, isn't it? Sorry, I chuckled, apologizing as I ran a hand through my hair. I had just taken a shower and wasn't expecting company. I'll throw on a shirt if you'd prefer. Oh, no, she glanced at my chest, then shrugged, her lips curving. I think you're just fine as you are. I caught the slight rise of her brow, the unspoken dare. She was testing the water, assessing me, but I'd already decided I wasn't here to charm her. Her attention was flattering, but I had no intention of lowering myself by pretending to worship the freedom she dressed herself in. More importantly, though, she began, how did you know I was Ariane? I could have been any woman walking through that door. I chuckled, shaking my head. I've heard stories about you, Princess. Stories of your revealing tastes. I let my smile fade, my gaze hardening as I added, only one person in this palace dresses like a whore while being accompanied by a knight. Turns out I was right. Her smile faltered, surprise flashing across her face. I saw the slight flicker of anger before she caught herself, recovering with a restrained smile. I heard you spent a lot of time in Essos. I imagine jokes there are different. I laughed, taking a step back to the table piled with fruits. I plucked an apple and bit into it, savoring her glare as I kept my back to her. I could feel her eyes on me, and it was clear she hadn't expected this. She wasn't used to being treated with anything less than reverence. That knight you brought with you, Sir Andre, isn't it? I said, glancing at her over my shoulder, a smirk on my lips. He was looking at you like he wanted to fuck you right then and there. Maybe he already has. I won't be surprised given your dressing sense and rumors. Unfortunately, I like my women, well, a bit less public about it. The silence was sharp, and I could feel her mood shift, her interest replaced with something colder. It was a pity, really. If only she'd come in here with the disdain she'd left with, that would have been simpler. Her interest only made it sadder, the crush fading from her eyes, replaced by something bitter and disappointed. The rumors failed to capture just how foul your personality is. Her eyes narrowed, a look of contempt hardening her gaze. She sounded angry. Since you seem to care so much about coverings, I think you can throw on a shirt now. Or do you hold that bare chests on men are somehow different from a woman's exposed skin? I've always hated how differently men and women are judged. It seems you are no different from the rest of them, Prince Viserys. I chuckled, biting into the apple, savoring its sweetness before tossing it back on the table. Men and women have their places, their roles. It's not a matter of looking down on you. We just aren't the same. I shrugged, my tone dismissive, already tiring of the subject. I didn't care to explain myself to her, it was her problem if she didn't like it. Her eyes remained fixed on me, her anger simmering beneath her gaze. Well, she said with a curt nod, turning sharply on her heel and striding toward the door without another word. She didn't bother hiding her fury, the insult simmering in her step as she swept from the room, leaving the air thick with her resentment. I watched her go, letting the false smile of arrogance drop the door shut behind her. I munched on my apple. It's a shame, really. She'd been the easiest way to pull Dorne to my side, the quickest route to gaining support from Prince Doran and the Dornish army. I knew how this looked, pushing away a simple solution, an engagement that could give me everything. But I had my own set of ideals. For a marriage, I wouldn't settle for a woman who paraded herself like that. No, dressing sense was one thing, character another. She was a whore. I wasn't going to get engaged to a whore, no matter if people called me a hypocrite. Now, I'd have to figure out a different way to gain Dorne's support. Arianne Myrtell's head burned with rage. How dare he insult her like that? The audacity of that man, standing there with his dismissive tone and those piercing, relaxed arrogant eyes. Her hands clenched into fists as she stalked down the corridors, barely noticing the guards and attendants who quickly stepped aside to avoid her wrath. When she reached the meeting chamber, she pushed the doors open a bit too hard for royal etiquette. Inside, her father and uncle were still talking, but her uncle Oberyn had freshly bathed, his hair still damp, leaning back with a look of ease. Doran looked as he always did, quiet and contemplative. When she stormed in, her father's gaze sharpened with curiosity, and Oberyn smiled. "Oh, you're back already," her uncle began, but she cut him off, fixing her father with a hard stare. "Father," she said, her voice tight, "I feel dishonored by this meeting with my ex-fiancé, Viserys Targaryen. He is just like every other arrogant man from outside Dorne, and I refuse to entertain any marriage with him. I am not going to marry someone who looks down on women, someone who would," her voice faltered with frustration. "He called me a whore in all but name." Doran blinked, taken aback by her vehemence. He turned his gaze to Oberyn, who cleared his throat, looking away from her while holding back a shrug. "Maybe I should have prepared you," Oberyn muttered, running a hand through his hair. The prince isn't exactly subtle with his words. Men from powerful lineages are often arrogant. Plus you have to understand the culture he comes from too. To them, Dornish men and women are, well, not holy. Doran shook his head with a sigh. "Arianne, you don't have to marry someone you don't like." His voice was calm, even gentle. "I have no intention of selling my daughter for a political marriage, certainly not one that brings us no benefit." Arianne felt her anger flare again, but not toward her father. Her father's measured words and his unyielding refusal to sacrifice her for mere strategy were reassuring. She was more than relieved knowing that she wouldn't be forced to marry that bastard. Yet she couldn't shake the humiliation of that encounter, the dismissive way Viserys had spoken as if she were something cheap and unworthy. "No," she said, her voice stealing as she straightened. "That's not enough." Doran shook his head. "We can't punish him for running his mouth. He's still a Targaryen, and your fiancé, even if that part is a past." "I don't want you to punish him," she said, gathering her breath. "I demand an honor trial of combat against him." Her father stared at her while Aberon's face fell, his hand rising to pinch the bridge of his nose as he let out a groan. She didn't care if she sounded frustrated. That bastard insulted Esser André Dalt too, didn't he? Tomorrow, Esser André Dalt would wipe his face on the floor. Author note: don't forget to keep voting smiley face. 34 comments 0 vote. 13 Can I see your dragon? Chapter 13. Can I see your dragon? The air in the old palace thrummed with anticipation, cheers swelling and fading like waves crashing against the ancient stone. Slanted sunlight poured through narrow windows high above, casting golden lines across the gathering. In the courtyard's center, a ring of castle guards stood watch, eyes sharp and fixed on the open ground that would serve as the arena. On the raised platform, Prince Doran Martell sat, his expression calm as his gaze swept over the crowd of Dornishmen below. Beside him, a baron lounged, his eyes falling on his daughters, the sand snakes, scattered in the crowd below. When they caught his eye, they nodded with a smile, their glances carrying the same fiery spirit as their father. Near them, Elaria watched with quiet amusement, her eyes warm as she soaked in the lively, charged energy of the crowd. "This is going to be interesting," she said. "I agree," Kinvara wanted over. She strided to the platform with that peculiar smile of hers, the flames of excitement reflected in her gaze. She inclined her head to the two princes, who nodded back and settled beside them. "Quite the lively start to the day," she murmured, her gaze sweeping the arena with a flicker of curiosity. "But are you sure about this, Prince Aberon? You've seen what he can do." "Ah, well," Aberon chuckled, though Doran frowned, a hint of curiosity in his expression. "I did request Prince Viserys to go easy. Hopefully, he'll listen." Doran was about to ask what was going on, when the crowd's focus shifted as Princess Arianne made her entrance. Murmurs followed her like ripples, voices low and filled with admiration. They cheered for her, and she waved at them. She moved through the assembly with the graceful ease of one born to be the center of attention, her dark hair catching the sunlight, her gaze steady and sure as she met their eyes. "Father, uncle," she greeted the princes, bowing a little, as the crowd's energy seemed to gather around her, rising higher as she took her place beside her father. Kinvara's gaze flicked to Arianne, her smile deepening slightly as she inclined her head. Arianne's response was polite, her nod restrained, though a faint tension edged her lips. Her distaste for the priestess was subtle but not unnoticeable. She didn't like the religion of the god of light, as a follower of the faith of the Seven. "Now that the princess is here, begin," Prince Doran said, nudging his chin. Then, a man in dark red robes, a bright sash slung across his chest, stepped forward, the announcer. He raised his hands, and the crowd fell silent, anticipation settling over them like a drawn breath. "Today," he proclaimed, his voice echoing across the courtyard, "we gather in love of our dear Princess Arianne Martell, whose honor shall be defended in this sacred duel of honor." He paused, letting the crowd's cheers rise once more, then continued. "First, we have Esser André Dalt. He'll be fighting for our princess." At his words, Esser André strode into the circle, his light armor polished, his form imposing with a broad shield in one hand and a long sword in the other. The crowd's roar surged, raised fists, and shouts of support filled the courtyard. "Esser André, the pride of Lemonwood," the announcer continued, his voice booming with pride. "Champion of our princess, who stands to uphold her honor." The cheers intensified, and Esser André raised his sword in acknowledgement, his gaze hard and ready. Arianne caught his eye, offering him a nod, her lips curving in a confident smile as she watched him step into position. "Dre is a powerful knight," she noted. "I can't wait to see that bastard's face when he's thoroughly humiliated." The announcer's tone shifted, an edge of intrigue coloring his voice. "And today, he faces a warrior from beyond our shores. A man from Volantis here to challenge those who walk the path of blood and sand. He, who has the second sons at his beck's call, a warrior known as this." A figure emerged from the shadows, face half hidden beneath a wrapped cloth. Viserys stepped forward, moving with a casual, almost dismissive grace. Clad in dark clothing, his Targaryen features concealed by a simple wig, he held nothing but a spear. It was an arrogant contrast to Ser Andre's armored form. His stance relaxed, his gaze unflinching. The crowd's murmurs grew, rippling through the courtyard, surprise flashing in their eyes at the sight of this outsider. This man, who was he to question their princess's honor? But as he stood there, calm and assured, those murmurs shifted, turning into enraged and curious cheers as they adjusted to his unbothered confidence. Ariane's gaze narrowed, her irritation tempered by something else, a hint of fear. Here wasn't someone awed by the crowd or the spectacle. No, he moved like he'd already won. How could a coward be so arrogant? Was she reading him wrong since his face was hidden? Now, the announcer's voice rose over the crowd. Let the duel begin. The courtyard held its breath as Ser Andre settled into a solid stance, shield up, sword ready. Across from him, Viserys twirled his spear, his grip so loose it seemed careless, his lips curving in a smirk under the cloth mask. The tension thickened, drawn tight as Andre launched forward, his blade slicing down toward Viserys' chest. Viserys sidestepped with ease, letting the sword pass by inches, and flicked his spear lightly against Andre's shield, a playful tap, more a taunt than an attack. Get him for me, Dre, Ariane called, a teasing lilt to her voice, her grin widening as she watched her chosen knight advance. Ser Andre's every step was heavy and deliberate, each swing of his sword powerful and precise. He was a knight that made his allies feel safe, and enemies scared. But Viserys was a shadow, slipping around him, his spear weaving through the air with a smooth elegance that seemed almost mocking. Andre's force was met with nothing but swift, effortless evasion, Viserys darting away each time as if barely invested in the fight. Slippery rat, frustration flashed in Andre's eyes, his strikes coming harder, his breaths growing rough as he fought to corner his elusive foe. Viserys' expression remained untouched, his eyes looking almost amused. His dodges were a clear taunt, as of mocking and shouting that Andre's strength held no threat here. He was like a spark of lightning dancing on earth. The crowd watched, spellbound, the tension thick as they took in the clash of styles, the brute strength of Ser Andre against Viserys' calm, unbothered agility. Each parry, every fluid sidestep, seemed to underscore the difference between them, and a ripple of realization passed through the spectators as it became obvious who held control. Boring fight, Viserys said when Ser Andre started to pant and slow down. Then, with a swift, calculated sweep, he brought his spear down in a powerful arc, meeting Andre's blade with precise force. Metal rang out, sharp in the silent courtyard, and Andre's sword shattered under the blow, pieces clattering to the ground. Stunned, Ser Andre faltered, his grip slipping as he took a step back, momentarily defenseless. Viserys had already moved, appearing behind him with a swift kick to Andre's back. The knight flew forward, his armored form crashing to the ground as he coughed blood. His weapon lay in pieces beside him as he lay still, dazed in the dust. Viserys rolled his shoulders, a smirk on his lips, his gaze finding Ariane's. He tilted his head, his voice rising over the silence. So, princess, he called out, his tone filled with mock innocence, what does it mean, to lose a duel of honor? Ariane's eyes burned with pride wounded, anger simmering beneath her gaze as she met his challenge. Around them, whispers grew, the crowd murmuring in disbelief. She wished she could see his head on a spike. ***. I hadn't expected the spoiled princess to feel so insulted she'd demand an honor duel. She was what, 22, and yet so thoroughly coddled. How could someone so thin-skinned hope to rule a land like Dorne? Now I walked beside Prince Oberyn, who was guiding his older brother with one hand. And on the other side of me, with her head dipped low, walked the princess herself, her proud gaze dulled, her expression a tight, stubborn silence. I'd embarrassed her, and it was fun doing so. At least she was quiet now. Ah, children fighting, Prince Doran said, his voice soft with laughter as he tried to ease the tension with a casual observation. The old Viserys might have taken deep offense at being called a child, but I let it roll off. Doran was simply trying to settle the matter with minimal fuss. But that aside, he added, his tone warming, you certainly fight well, Prince. I gave a nod, catching his gaze with a faint smile. If I've learned anything, it's that I fight best when there's something on the line. And it's hard not to enjoy a Dornish duel. Oberyn chuckled, giving his brother a glance. You've got an instinct for the spear, he said, looking at me with something close to approval. Your movements are so impressive that it's rare for men not born here. I shrugged, keeping my expression smooth. I admire the freedom, that's all. Spears are more fun than swords. We walked on, Doran occasionally turning to ask me a question or offer some casual comment. His words were calculated, his tone deceptively mild. He didn't say it directly like a baron, but he too was impressed by my spearmanship. It was the reason I hadn't just defeated Sir Andre in the first 10 seconds. Ariane kept to her silence, though I could feel her tension, like the sharp edge of a blade waiting for its chance to strike. After a while, Doran's tone softened into something more curious. I heard about your dragon, Prince Viserys, he said, his voice laced with a cautious intrigue. It's been a long time since Dorne has seen such a creature. Too long, I'd say. He offered a faint smile, a sign of his interest. I glanced at him, a flicker of amusement passing through me. She's a ravenous one, and she's hungry, I replied. If I bring her out, she'll likely dart off to hunt. Unless, of course, you happen to have fresh meat at hand. A baron laughed, his eyes glinting with understanding. Fresh meat is easy enough to find here. Doran nodded, his gaze considering. You're in luck, then. I had some sheep butchered earlier today. They're waiting just nearby, if you would like to show us this dragon of yours. I inclined my head, following the two princes down a narrow passage until we emerged into a courtyard. Several sheep carcasses hung suspended on ropes, their bodies limp and lifeless. Behind them, there was a farm where live sheep were eating grass. It was a sad scene if one thought about it. The air was quiet, tinged with the scent of blood, and the sky above was darkening, casting long shadows over the scene. Should be enough, I said and stopped before the bodies, glancing between Doran, a baron, and Ariane, her gaze fixed ahead. I raised a hand, snapping my fingers. They all watched as the air cracked, splitting open with a shiver as space itself seemed to tear apart. From that rift, a dog-sized figure sprang forward, a flash of glistening scales and sharp talons. My Viserion landed with a quick, silent grace, her eyes bright and hungry as they locked onto the hanging meat. However, she didn't rush to eat that. Instead, she rushed toward the living sheep on the farm behind. She lunged forward, latching onto one of the white furballs with her sharp teeth, tearing into the flesh. A low growl escaped her throat, and a burst of flame followed, charring the sheep with a crisp sizzle before it could even scream. The flames also caught on half a dozen other ships, burning them alive. Ariane gasped as the scent of burning meat filled the courtyard as she tore into her meal, her growls a deep, satisfying rumble. Your dragon, Viserion, has killed a sheep. You've received experience points. Your dragon, Viserion, has killed a sheep. You've received experience points. Your dragon, Viserion, has killed a sheep. You've received experience points. You've leveled up. Level 11. All three of them watched the scene with wide eyes, mouths agape, and faces a mix of awe and fascination. But it was Ariane's expression that caught my eye. Her initial anger melted into something deeper, her gaze wide and transfixed, a look of reverence overtaking her features as she took in the sight of Viserion devouring the meal. The anger that had hardened her gaze softened, replaced by something like reverence, as though she was seeing herself ride the dragon in the future. Her kids doing the same. This was no mere show, no carnival creature on display. It was a dragon, and everyone understood the implication of it. They also understood the fact that it was mine. 14. The Dornish Plan. Chapter 14. The Dornish Plan. The water gardens of Dorne carried a stillness that could lull even the sharpest minds into calm. The soft patter of fountains mingled with the faint cries of children playing in the shaded pools, their laughter bubbling over the low murmur of waves in the distance. Palm trees swayed lightly, their shadows stretching across the tiled paths that wound between the water and the garden's citrus groves. The smell of salt clung to the air, mingling with the fragrance of orange blossoms, while the warm breeze teased the edges of silk curtains hanging from the old palace arches. Doran Martell moved slowly, his steps slow, his frame leaning slightly into a baron's helpful arm. The younger brother had adjusted his natural quick pace to match Doran's measured rhythm. Neither spoke as they left the gardens and ascended into the quiet shade of the palace corridors, where the sun's light softened into dim amber and filtered through windows. Inside a grand chamber, a baron helped Doran onto a low couch. The elder prince sank back with a quiet sigh, one hand resting lightly on the armrest, his other lifting to rub at his temple. So, a baron broke the silence as he leaned against the back of a carved chair, his sharp gaze fixed on his brother. What do you think of him, then? After seeing his fighting style, and that dragon. Doran closed his eyes briefly as if to shut out the weight of a baron's excitement. You said he wants to invade the armies of the 5 kings on his own first? He asked, voice slow and calculated. A baron nodded, failing to hold back a smug smile. That's what he says. Doran opened his eyes again, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. Quote. Then I don't see any reason not to support him. A baron's grin widened, his hand clapping briefly against the chair's wooden back as he straightened. So, you agree, he said, the satisfaction clear in his voice. I knew you'd be able to see the opportunity in this, brother. This is going to be big. Doran tilted his head, his smile faint but pointed. I can see that. If he fails, what's lost to us? He asked, his tone soft. If he dies, no one will trace him to Dorne. No one will know he ever stood in our gardens. And the second sons, they'll retreat across the narrow sea, and we'll be left untouched. A baron laughed lightly, a sharp gleam in his eyes. But if he doesn't die, then we gain the Iron Throne, Doran finished, his tone colder now, like a knife's edge hidden in the calm. His eyes locked with a baron's, the faintest flicker of shared ambition passing between them. They weren't interested in the throne because they wanted to rule the realm, but because if they had a king they could trust to sit on the throne, they'd finally be able to deliver justice. We'll get our revenge, a baron added, his voice now low. There was no smile this time, just a raw hunger that lingered beneath his words. The mention of vengeance lingered in the air like smoke. His hand flexed against the back of the chair. You're wiser than me, brother. I know he's strong, but, do you think he's ready? I think, Doran said quietly, that he has no choice but to be. The rumors about him aren't true. He's a strong man, and men like him don't come this far without real fire in their blood. But, fire isn't enough. He paused, looking at his brother with a weighted expression. We'll watch, we'll wait. A baron nodded slowly, but the gleam in his eye hadn't faded. Watching isn't nearly as fun, but I suppose patience has its uses. It always does, Doran murmured. The two brothers sat in silence for a moment, the faint sound of water from the garden seeping into the room like a whisper. Then Doran nodded, and a baron clapped his hands for servants to hear, bring rich liquor. We'll have guests soon. The golden light of the setting sun streamed through the narrow windows of the meeting room, casting shadows across the stone walls. The evening was settling over Dorne, the warm air carrying a stillness that was only broken by the occasional hum of the fountains in the distance. Viserion lay sprawled across my lap, her heavy form rising and falling with her breaths. Every now and then, her exhales came with a faint, sharp snore that sounded more like the crack of a whip than the soft murmur of sleep. It was oddly endearing. Although it worried me for how long I'd be able to hold her with my body. She'd soon become far larger than me, enough to carry me and such. Then again, that wasn't a bad thing. I should be looking forward to it instead. Prince Doran, seated comfortably across from me, observed Viserion with unmasked fascination. His fingers tapped lightly against the armrest of his chair, his expression thoughtful as his gaze swept over her small, scaled form. How big do you think she'll grow? He asked after a moment, breaking the silence. I've had the rare luxury of seeing the skulls of the last dragons in the Red Keep, what little was left of them. They were barely the size of a kitten when they died. But this one, his eyes narrowed slightly as if measuring Viserion's form against his memory. This one is already bigger. Do you have any guesses of how much larger she might become? I glanced down at Viserion, running a hand absent-mindedly over her ridged back. I'm not certain about the exact size, I admitted, though my voice carried an edge of confidence. But she'll grow larger than this castle. Much larger. Doran's brows lifted at that, a flicker of intrigue passing over his features. Beside him, a baron let out a low chuckle, his fingers drumming against the hilt of his spear as he leaned forward slightly. A bold claim, Doran murmured, though there was no disbelief in his tone. Larger than the castle, it would be something to see. It will be, I said simply. I can't wait to see, Kinvara chimed in, smiling. Doran gave a short laugh, shaking his head lightly. Regardless, let us set dragons aside for now. Tell me, Prince Viserys, a baron tells me you intend to challenge the 5 kings. Which of them do you mean to strike first? And how do you envision Dorne aiding your cause? I leaned back slightly, my fingers resting lightly against Viserion's side as I considered his question. The 5 kings, Joffrey Baratheon, Stannis Baratheon, Renly Baratheon, Balin Greyjoy, and Robb Stark. Balin Greyjoy was an afterthought, barely worth the breath it took to think of his name. He was an isolated old fool playing a game too big for him, his influence barely brushing the edges of the mainland. Renly Baratheon was even less of a threat, a pretender doomed to die before he could achieve anything of note. Robb Stark, the young wolf, was a greater concern. His armies were formidable, and his victories had carved his name into the histories already. But Robb Stark, despite his strength, was not my greatest enemy. He was naive, too honorable for his own good, and far too removed from my immediate goals. That left Stannis and Joffrey. Stannis Baratheon had always been a threat. In another time, the original timeline, he would have reached the walls of King's Landing, his claim reinforced by the fire and blood of his faith. If not for Tywin Lannister's intervention, he might have succeeded. My presence, a butterfly effect, might tip the scales in his favor this time. But the true prize was none of them. Like a hawk, my eyes had always been focused on King's Landing itself. Joffrey Baratheon. The bastard sat on the Iron Throne, a boy king bloated with arrogance and cruelty. He would like any of the other 5 kings, but his death wouldn't be soon enough for my liking. That bastard was an irritating bastard, and I wanted him dead now. Both for what I'd witnessed in the show and also because of my pride, as Viserys hated him the most since it was he who sat on the throne right now. Additionally, to strike King's Landing would be to strike at the heart of the realm. It would throw the continent into chaos, creating a wave that could topple the remaining players faster than they could react. And most importantly, Joffrey, that bastard. King's Landing, I said at last, my voice cutting through the quiet of the room. A faint smile tugged at my lips as I met Doran's gaze. I plan to kill Joffrey Baratheon. Doran's expression remained calm, but his eyes flickered with something unreadable. A baron grinned and then let out a low whistle, leaning back with a wolfish grin. You don't lack ambition, Doran murmured, his tone carrying a note of approval beneath the caution. After armies, I replied smoothly, ambition is what wins wars. The game had begun, and King's Landing was my first move. I couldn't wait to leave. Author note. Next update on Sunday. Happy reading. Keep voting. 49 comments, 0 vote. 15. You want to be queen. Chapter 15. You want to be queen. Author note. It's a Sunday again. Last time, we completed 100 stones in 40 minutes. I am sure we can do it faster now, given we've more collections. So here's the goal again. I'll post the next chapter immediately if we cross 100 stones in 60 minutes. Once again, I'll put the additional goal out there in case it's somehow completed. Goal: 400 stones within the next 120 minutes for another chapter. We did cross 250 plus last time, so maybe we'll cross it this time. Start voting. Viserys Targaryen was extremely arrogant and proud of his lineage, so at least he'd read his Targaryen lore when he was young. But they were old memories. I had the memories, but they were kind of blurry now. So I was reading through it again. I rested against the bed frame, the weight of the thick tome heavy in my hands. The pages were filled with the legacy of my bloodline, the victories and failures of Targaryens who had come before me. The words blurred slightly as I read aloud, the cadence of my voice filling the quiet room. King Daeron I, the young dragon, takes the throne and almost immediately launches an invasion of Dorne, which had remained defiantly independent since Aegon's landing. My voice trailed off, the next line hovering at the edge of my tongue when Kinvara, seated at the edge of the bed, interrupted. By its end, he lost 60,000 men and his own life at the tender age of 18, she said casually, her tone smooth and unbothered. Her fingers trailed through her damp hair as she groomed herself in front of the mirror, her fiery red locks catching the soft glow of the candlelight. I blinked, annoyance flickering through me before I frowned. You just spoiled my read. Kinvara glanced at me over her shoulder, her lips curling into a small, mischievous smile. Come on, it's common knowledge. You're the last dragon, aren't you? Shouldn't this all be second nature to you by now? I clicked my tongue, snapping the book shut with a sharp sound. I've read it before, but it's not as if I recite the damn thing every night. And besides, I added, my gaze narrowing at her teasing smirk, it's more enjoyable without interruptions. A knock echoed at the door before she could reply, the sound hesitant and uncertain. I glanced at Kinvara, who raised an eyebrow in silent question, before calling out. Who is it? It's me. The voice on the other side was soft, unsure. Ariane. Kinvera looked at me, her smile deepening as she rose from the bed with an almost predatory grace. I gave a short nod, and the door creaked open. Ariane Martel stepped inside, pausing as her gaze immediately landed on Kinvera, who stood beside the bed, her hair damp, her movements deliberate as she adjusted her robes. For a moment, the room was steeped in silence. Ariane's expression was tight, her lips pressed into a thin line as she glanced between the two of us. Kinvera broke the tension with a smile, stepping forward as she placed a hand briefly on Ariane's shoulder. "The Lord of Light shines upon you," she said smoothly before brushing past her and leaving the room. Ariane's eyes twitched as she watched her leave, and I barely managed to suppress the laugh rising in my chest. Kinvera was a troll, and she knew exactly what she was doing. "She just came out of the bath," Ariane said, her voice low but sharp as her gaze swung back to me. "In your room, why?" "And," I replied, leaning back against the bed frame, my expression neutral as I rested the book on my lap. "Why was she doing her hair here too?" she demanded. I smiled faintly, tilting my head. "Oh, princess, you should know better than anyone why. I was making her bite the sheets earlier." Her eyes flared with anger as I casually set the book aside. "What do you need?" Ariane scoffed, folding her arms across her chest, ignoring my question, "and yet you judge me as if I'm the whore." I shrugged, my tone light as I leaned forward slightly. "I believe in the lock and key analogy. Is it not popular in Dornay?" Her scowl deepened, and I laughed, continuing. "A key that can open many locks is a master key, but a lock that can be opened by many keys." "Shut up." Her voice was sharp as she glared at me, her eyes blazing. "I've heard that stupid saying before. Women are not objects. Neither are men." I compared men with keys. "Who's offended?" I leaned back again, watching the irritation bloom across her face. "I'm just messing with you, princess. Although yes, I wasn't lying when I said those are my preferences. They may be hypocritical, but they're mine. Surely you can't judge me for that." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing, her silence speaking volumes. A moment stretched between us, thick with unspoken tension, before she sighed and straightened her posture. "I heard you're leaving soon. So, I've decided," she began, her tone quieter now. "Decided what?" I asked, feigning disinterest as I reached for my book again. "The engagement," she said, her voice firmer. "I'll rekindle the proposal, since I lost the duel." I slammed the book down, the sound reverberating through the room as I fixed her with a sharp look. "I wasn't dueling for your hand, woman. What do you mean you accept the proposal?" My tone was edged with annoyance. "I was the one who rejected it first, not you. I don't want a woman who spreads her legs for everyone. I don't." Yeah, I cut her off with a wave of my hand. "Only for those you love." "Same thing." I pushed myself off the bed, my movements deliberate as I crossed the room. Ariane instinctively stepped back, her bravado faltering as I loomed closer. "You're mistaken, princess," I said, my voice low as her back hit the wall. "Your father and uncle already promised their support. They didn't offer me your hand because they knew I didn't want it. They didn't need to. You've lost your leverage." Her eyes widened, a flicker of doubt crossing her features as she stared up at me. "What?" I continued, my hand reaching out to grasp her chin firmly. "Did seeing my dragon make you so greedy? Is that why you think marriage is now the right choice?" She blinked at me, her defiance melting into something more vulnerable. Her gaze was glossy, and her lips trembled. "You're horrible," she whispered. "This is a cruel world, Ariane," I replied, letting her chin go as I stepped back. "Don't hate me for being honest. You want to know why I won't marry you?" I turned, glancing at her over my shoulder. "Because I don't need to. Your father already promised me his support. I don't need you." Her silence was heavy, her pride clearly bruised, but I ignored it. "Come here," I said, my tone commanding. Ariane hesitated, but something in my gaze compelled her. Slowly, she stepped forward. "Stay by my side," I said. She hesitated but eventually moved closer, sitting beside me. Her eyes were slightly shaky, nervousness flashing across her face as she swallowed hard. I reached out, running my fingers through her hair, letting the silky strands slide between them. "You're beautiful," I said, my voice softer now. "But beauty alone doesn't rule the world. Strength does." Her gaze flickered, confusion and something else mingling in her expression. "You want to be queen?" I asked, tilting her chin up to meet my gaze. "I am not sure if you're suitable to be one," as you were so offended by a mere rejection that you demanded a duel of honor. He said, but I suppose everyone should get a second chance. I'll give you one. If you wish to prove yourself, stay close to me. Show me your loyalty, your strength, and perhaps, who knows what the future holds. Her lips parted in shock, but no words came. What? You heard me, I said, my voice calm as I brushed a thumb over her cheek. I like women. Kinvera brings warmth and comfort, but I seek something more. I need someone with ambition, fire, and the ability to stand beside me. So I think I need more women in my life and bed, I said, even as she fidgeted on her spot. I plan to make the daughters of high lords my mistresses. I trust you don't judge. After all, the Dornish don't judge a man's lust. Then, when I'm done conquering the land, I cut her off. I'll choose my queen from among the mistresses. I traced a finger down her chin, slowly raising her chin and making her eyes lock onto mine. It'll not be based on their past or how many men they slept with, but based on how much I've accompanied their company. My gaze lingered on hers, holding her in place. What do you say, little princess? You want to earn that? No. The room fell silent, the tension thick as her breath hitched, and I leaned back, a faint smirk on my lips. Arianne Martell was never going to be my queen. Not in this lifetime, not in any. But gods, she was too damn hot to let any other man have her. No, I wanted her broken under me, her moans echoing with surrender. Queen Arianne, I murmured, letting the words roll off my tongue like a sweet tease. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? The Queen of Dragons, the first dragon rider in hundreds of years who isn't a Targaryen. My gaze locked onto hers, and I watched the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed, caught in the web of my words. Tell me, princess, wouldn't you like to ride a dragon someday? Why yes, she whispered, her voice trembling, her gaze filled with something raw and untamed. Gods, this woman was greedy. I like that. Good, I said simply before reaching out and yanking her toward me with one sharp motion. Her body was light, and my strength was absolute. She landed on my lap, her breath hitching as her soft curves pressed against me. You can ride one right now. Her eyes flickered with a dangerous mix of greed, hunger, and something darker, lust. This woman had a weakness, and I'd seen it laid bare before me. She thrived on humiliation, only to be soothed by the promise of something sweeter afterward. A need born from a fractured past, the telltale signs of her daddy issues written in every movement. She craved validation from a man who could dominate her, even as she spoke of freedom and equality. Her gaze locked onto mine, her chest rising and falling as she leaned forward. And then, with a sharp, desperate motion, she crushed her lips against mine. Her kiss was fierce, almost punishing, her body squirming against me as if demanding attention. And gods, wasn't it intoxicating to watch her unravel? I allowed her to lead for a moment, her tongue dancing against mine with desperate hunger. Her fingers clawed at my shirt, her breaths coming in sharp, ragged gasps as she sought to claim some semblance of control. But I wasn't about to yield so easily. My hands slid up her back, tangling in her hair, and with a firm tug, I pulled her head back, breaking the kiss. Her eyes widened, her lips glistening and parted, her chest heaving with each breath. I held her gaze, smirking as I leaned in, my voice a low, husky whisper. Shush, not so fast, princess. You don't call the shots here, do you? She whimpered, her eyes flashing with a mix of defiance and desire. I kept one hand firmly tangled in her hair, the other sliding down to cup her breast through her dress. Her breath hitched as my thumb circled her dark nipple that she was so proud of, feeling it harden beneath the fabric. Don't be shy now, I like my girls honest. So answer truthfully. This is what you want, isn't it? I murmured, my lips brushing against her ear. You want me to take control, to make you feel liberated. She stared at me, her breathing rough, as she swallowed. A moment later, her nod was barely perceptible. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I chuckled before releasing her hair and moving both hands to the neckline of her dress. With a swift, decisive motion, I tore the fabric apart, exposing her breasts to the cool air of the room. She gasped, her hands instinctively moving to cover herself, but I grabbed her wrists, twirling around and pushing her on the bed. I loomed over her, pinning them behind her back with one hand. Don't hide from me, I said, my eyes locked onto her now exposed flesh. Her breasts were perfect, round, and firm, her nipples hard and begging for attention. Oh, how full those childbearing hips were. I leaned down, capturing a nipple in my mouth, sucking and teasing it with my tongue. She moaned, her body arching against me as she squirmed under me. I released her wrists, my hands moving to her hips, tearing her clothes as she felt my hardened cock press against her. Oh, her eyes widened as she felt me press against her, only the fabric of my pants separating us. I kissed her while lowering my pants just enough to free myself, feeling the cool air a contrast to the heat of her body. "Aren't you looking so eager?" I asked, my voice hoarse as the tip of my cock pressed against her fat, hungry pussy. Her eyes were glazed with lust, her breath quick and desperate. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, I want it. Please." I didn't need any more encouragement. With a swift, powerful motion, I lifted her hips and slammed down my cock, her moan filling the room as I filled her completely. I leaned over, catching her mouth, as her body tensed. Her arms hugged me tightly, and her nails dug into my shoulders as she adjusted to the sensation. I leaned back, my hands holding her face, my gaze locked onto her silver eyes. "Hey, now, princess," I said, grinning. "Let's see how well you can ride. Come find fellow fans on Discord and more chapters on Patreon. Patreon.com/Master4thWall. Discord. Web links.